Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
You are not in Kansas anymore. You are on Pandora.
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Film Jump with your host Jesse and Chris. This is going to be episode 3.
Yeah, episode 2, part 2, episode 3, the sequel. There we go.
Episode 3, part 2 of episode 2.
Yeah.
Anyways, what's up, Chris? How you doing, man?
Oh, doing fantastic. Ready to talk about the back 4 years of the 2000s.
Yeah, so episode 2, which was part 1 of this little
Yeah, episode 2, part 1, number 2.
thing. Yeah. We talked about movies from the year 2000 to 2005, and these are the movies that we kind of grew up with, our favorites, and some honorable mentions for sure, but we're not going to mention every single movie that was ever released. We'd be here for 5 hours.
Yeah, maybe some dishonorable mentions.
Yeah, potentially. But I kind of led the list off previous episodes, so Chris is going to take it away.
Yeah.
Chris, go ahead and let's just get right into it.
Yeah, no breaks. So
2006?
yeah, right off the bat, an underrated comedy I want to shout out is something called Grandma's Boy. Did you ever see that movie?
Grandma's Boy.
Okay, yeah. Good. Not a whole lot to say about it as a film, but just like one of those comedies that came and went. Basically, no one saw it. Rented the DVD with my brother and cousins, and it was just like a gem at the time.
Is that the one where Jonah Hill is on her chest the whole time?
Yes.
And he wants like cereal or something?
Yes, it's about video game developers, and it's got the whole cast is like, oh, that guy from that thing, and no one ever remembers. But it's just such a funny movie.
And
It's
he's
just
got
such a wild.
the cape. How did he see me? Or whatever.
Yeah,
I remember that.
the nerd who's always wearing the black leather like he's in the Matrix, and yeah, so it's just a great comedy. Really underrated, funny laugh movie.
And now that I think about it, real quick, he's in a movie that we're going to talk about later.
Yeah,
and a very big movie.
He comes back around. Yeah,
Anyways.
Joel David Moore. He's going to come back around. But yeah, shout out Grandma's Boy. And then like the birth of the term torture porn with the movie Hostel was January of 2006.
Eli Roth.
Yeah, really kind of like the Saw movies were kind of doing it, but I remember like when that movie came out, it was like a big deal. They were like, oh my God, this movie's just about people being tortured for 90 minutes. So again, I'm not really much of a horror junkie these days.
I don't know if we can even really say tortured and porn, especially together on a podcast, but you know what? It's our podcast.
Yeah, we're going to say it. It's a term. It's not relevant to the real thing. Underworld had its sequel in early 2006, Underworld Evolution, which is pretty solid, almost as good as the first one, but not quite all the way. But Kate Beckinsale still being cool. The third, Final Destination, which maybe, some people, when I said like I kind of like the second one a lot, some people are like, oh, the second one is the worst one. It's like, I get it, because the plot of the second one is kind of like a bunch of strangers that kind of come together. There's no real, it's not like they're like high school students and whatnot, so I get the reasoning behind that. I just always kind of like the vibe of the second one. The second one was the first one I saw, but number 3, Saw, it's got Mary Elizabeth Winstead in it, in an early
That's the
role
roller
for her.
coaster?
Yeah, with the one with the roller coaster at the start. And I remember it was an interesting thing when reviews for that were out. They were like, oh, she's got a great career ahead of her. And then she ended up having a pretty big career ahead of her. It's kind of nice when you see stuff like that happen. The Hills Have Eyes, a horror remake of a brutal 70s exploitation movie into a modern movie.
That's a tough watch.
Yeah, very tough watch. I watched that on DVD with my dad and my brother in the room, and it was just like, oh my gosh, like what is this? I picked the movie out. You know
what I've learned from doing these podcasts with you recently, and you'd think I would have already known this, but and somebody even pointed out this earlier today or the other day, and they were like, man, Chris got to go to a lot of movies. He was taken to a lot of movies that probably wouldn't have taken my own son.
Absolutely. People can, the detractors can be like, oh, those weren't responsible parents. My parents were awesome. I don't care. They took me to great movies. I always understood and had a good frame of reference. I'm a smart kid. I always was. Nothing ever I didn't, the worst thing that watching those movies ever did to me is make me like those movies a lot. Now I've kind of grown out of them, but I didn't go do anything awful. I had cool parents. I don't care what anyone says.
Well, and I think The Hills Have Eyes remake is it's a decent movie.
I'm pretty sure Wes Craven himself said that he preferred it to the original. Like I said, it's not really in my wheelhouse of movies that I love anymore. I'm kind of out of horror movies, but when I was a teenager, I was watching all that stuff. I was gobbling it up, so it is what it is. first big kind of great, really good movie of 2006 that I like is V for Vendetta, originally scheduled for November 5th, 2005, delayed to March, which is the stupidest decision ever. But really well done movie. Hugo Weaving as V is awesome. Natalie Portman's great in it.
Excellent. That's the one that I got wrong in the last episode, because if you IMDb it, it still says 2005.
Yeah, it's weird because I think 300 also says 2006. Like, they go with like these weird premieres that they had at festivals or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not actually from that year though. But yeah, V for Vendetta is really good, based on a great graphic novel by Alan Moore. Slither, James Gunn putting our guy Nathan Fillion. Thank you. My gosh, I'm blanking on his name right now. And a good, like, that's one of those cases, because we'll have a case later here where a horror comedy really doesn't work. Slither's one of those cases where it kind of does. Like, the big thing with horror comedies, it's like, is it too scary that it becomes not funny, or is it too funny that it doesn't work and as a horror movie? But it's like, if you can thread the needle well enough, it kind of really does work. Slither's one of those, but I think generally does it. You ever see the movie Lucky Number 11?
Yes, it's on my list in case you missed it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it was a
Josh
weird.
Hartnett.
Yeah, Josh Hartnett, Morgan Freeman, a really interesting kind of
Bruce Willis.
Yeah, Bruce Willis, kind of like a noir, kind of a mystery, kind of crime movie. You know, kind of an odd.
Tucci.
Yeah, kind of an odd kind of a movie. Not really on brand for me these days, but I remember watching it and I saw the trailers and previews made it look very dumb to me, but then when I watched it later, I was like, man, this is kind of like way more legit than you'd think it would be.
And
fun little movie.
And it's one of those movies that kind of plays on like
Tropes.
misdirection on purpose, and it has a little bit of a twist and kind of a cool setup at the end there. One of my favorite, I just like the dialogue. One of my favorite parts is when the guy's like, "Oh, well, he's the fairy." Well, why do they call him the fairy? Well, because he's a fairy.
Yeah.
It's like it's like
Stuff
this
like
banter. It almost seems like, I don't know who it was written by. I'd have to look it up.
I would too.
But it almost seems kind of like one of those Guy Ritchie type quick banter.
Yeah, in the age
of
of that. Yeah, a solid video game horror adaptation, Silent Hill.
Yeah, the first one is good.
Like, very atmospheric. The CGI's aged terribly, and again, it's like, these horror movies are about horrible things, but very like atmospheric, great, like scary experience in the theater. Like, really kind of rocks you. The design work and the production design and the whole aesthetic of the Silent Hill. It's like a haunted house, but instead of a house, it's a whole town.
And Pyramid Head.
Yeah, Pyramid Head is terrifying. So great horror movie. If horror is your thing, Silent Hill is a great one. Mission Impossible 3, the first Mission Impossible I saw.
Oh yeah, you're right, because I remember. Yep. Go ahead.
I saw it in the DVD days. I didn't go to theaters to see it.
I saw this one in the theater.
Caught it on DVD. Everyone's got a general awareness of the first Mission Impossible. Like the tightrope, and he stops right above the floor, and he's sprawled out. But this was the first one I watched on DVD. I was interested because I was a fan of Lost, and J.J. Abrams was involved in Lost, and then J.J. Abrams directed this movie, so that's how I watched it. Like, just really well put together. It's still kind of like, I don't know if it's one of my favorites of the whole franchise, but now that I've seen them all, I definitely prefer it to number 2 by a wide margin. I don't think that's anything crazy.
And it gave us a really good taste of J.J. Abrams' like frantic,
kinetic,
and kinetic filmmaking style. And I think one of my favorite scenes is the bridge scene. I mean, really everything. It starts off with the ending kind of climax, and then it kind of gets back to that towards the end of the movie, and just really, like you said, kinetic. I think that's a good word for it.
Yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman's solid in that movie as the villain. He's unnerving, and that bridge scene in particular. I remember in the trailers the big moment where they shoot like the rocket at him and he flings him into the car. I remember seeing that and I was like, oh my gosh! I was like, this is a wild movie. I want to check this out. So, hats off to Mission Impossible.
Score 3. By Michael Giacchino.
Yeah, when he was definitely Giacchino became a great composer. But early days. Poseidon, kind of a wild summer blockbuster, misfire a little bit. I remember thinking it was going to be a bigger deal than it was.
I remember Wolfgang Peterson, the director, he did like a little a little interview thing, and said that why is it in movies where people have like plot armor, and like if somebody dies, like you can't pick and choose who dies, something like that, to where he said it's not fair in real life who lives or dies. And that movie definitely has a couple scenes in it where you're like, they take out some characters and you're like, oh, okay, you're not playing around.
Yeah, and it's
like
sort of
the elevator scene where the guy gets booted down and he falls down the shaft.
There's a certain drowning scene in that movie that is like absolutely like horrifying, you know? So yeah, I enjoy that, you know. I came up watching a lot of slashers and horror movies and things like that. So I was used to, if you start off with a cast of 9 to 12 people, by the end of it, 1 to 2 are going to live. So when I started to see bigger blockbusters and you'd have these huge ensemble casts and like Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean where most of them would all make it to the end, it always felt a little weird to me. I'm like, half of these characters should have died by the end. But that's just me.
Good VFX work in that movie for sure.
Yeah. The Da Vinci Code, never a movie I was really a fan of. It was a huge hit and a big deal, but like never my thing.
Yeah, the book was huge.
Yeah. So we can gloss right over that one. Nothing against it, but wasn't my deal.
Yeah.
X-Men The Last Stand.
Okay.
I think so sort of hated on.
It is overhated.
That it's kind of underrated. You know, it's not as good as 1 and 2. It's missing the kind of director style that Bryan Singer brought. Brett Ratner brought more of the kind of typical Marvel style of an action comedy, to tell you the truth. He kind of brought more of that to it, made something that felt a little smaller in scope, but some really well-directed action sequences in that movie. The sequence in the house. With Professor X and Jean Grey and Juggernaut. The finale on Alcatraz Island is a very well-executed final battle for a superhero movie. You know, it's a little rushed. It kind of pushes some main characters off to the side a bit much. From what I understand, a lot of that was filming and scheduling and rushing. They were making a release date. This thing changed directors something like 2, 3, 4 times. So a lot of influx on it, and they kind of made the best that they could of it. But I think it's legit. I think it's a good standalone one-off X-Men movie, if not necessarily the greatest conclusion to a trilogy.
2 things I'll say about that one. My favorite part of that movie is when I think the Juggernaut kicks Logan through the ceiling and then he comes out the other bedroom. It does like a cool little, I don't know the actual Hollywood term, like a Texas switch, or I forgot the name of it, but there's a term for it where one person goes in and the other person comes out. It's 2 different people, but it's meant to be the same.
Yeah.
And it is so good. And the other thing I'll say is that movie gets points for actually having finality to the story. You know, a story is only as good as it can, you know, end per se.
Yeah.
And you have characters that come to an end, or their story at least.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And hats off to it for that. You know, again, I think it's overhated. Not saying that it's some undiscovered masterpiece that needs this great reappraisal, but it is not nearly as bad. Considering how bad a modern movie, when you get a bad sequel, how huge the drop-off is, this was not that bad by comparison. Cars, you a fan of Cars? I was never into Cars.
But at this time, I wasn't. I don't know if I noticed like I don't want to say the decline in Pixar, and their filmmaking, because they would later come out with like Inside Out, which is great, and you know, stuff like that.
This feels like it lacks the prestige a little bit.
It was just too Thomas the Train for me.
Yeah,
you know, vehicles with eyes. I was not into it.
Yeah, granted, they made a movie called Toy Story, and the merchandising of the Toy Story franchise is huge, but making one called Cars, it felt like that was a story decision driven by a commercial mindset of, do you know how many cars are big with boys, and so if we make a movie about cars, it's gonna sell like hotcakes. And to this day, like that's a merchandise franchise.
Yeah.
That's not even a storytelling franchise.
Larry the Cable Guy is, what is it, Mater? And
I know.
Owen Wilson.
It's like in a Pixar movie, it feels like something DreamWorks would have done. Not to hate
Illumination.
Yeah, not to hate on DreamWorks, but the kind of like, it felt like Pixar kind of doing that mainstream casting celebrities, stunt casting, publicity, fun kind of thing. And it's like, man, I never dug Cars that much. My younger brother watched it nonstop, so I can't stand that movie. Speaking of Cars, Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift.
Okay.
Notable for being Justin Lin's directorial debut with the franchise, and then he directed 4 or 5 of them after that. It's got a style to it. It's not the best Fast and Furious movie, but it's set in Japan, so it kind of has this stylistic flair to it that's fun. It's definitely an improvement stylistically on the second one.
I think it feels foreign enough as a movie and as like a culture that it feels very fresh, you know, to at least American audiences. And I think that one is better than it has any right to be. It's not amazing, but it's very cool. You know, that's a word we use a lot. It's very cool.
Slick, stylish.
And then at the very end, you know, Vin Diesel comes back at the very end.
Makes his cameo, kind of nice. The Lake House. Do you remember that trash heap of a movie? I didn't watched it, but apparently that's the movie. I had to bring this up because this is some movie where it's this weird thing where like people are trading notes back and forth into the past and future.
Isn't that Keanu Reeves?
Yeah, with Keanu Reeves.
Sandra Bullock?
Yes, so
Yeah.
they're trading notes back and forth into the past and future through this like magical mailbox. And I just remember this interview where Keanu Reeves was trying to explain what the plot of this movie was, and it only made me more confused. And so I just remember every discussion I ever had about that movie was like, that looks dumb, that sounds dumb, who would want to go see it? And then it was a flop. I still haven't seen it.
So, Mom, I know you're listening to this. We know you like the Lake House a lot.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. That's hilarious. I did not know your
She
mom.
loves the Lake House.
That's amazing. Okay, well maybe it's not so bad. It's actually a really underrated classic. That you know,
I'll wait for the text message on this one.
that's exceptional. All right, a comedy that did kind of work a little bit. I was never as much into it, but Click. A lot of people liked Click when it came out. You know,
Adam Sandler was still pretty, like, he was still on his A game, you know, like, they weren't as, I think, striking gold or, you know, or light, you know, whatever, as he was in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, but at this point, but they were still good, you know, not to go ahead or backwards or whatever, but, you know, he had Chuck and Larry and Click, and he had all these ones kind of at the same time where, in every one of these, he's got a wife who is definitely way more attractive than he is.
yeah, and he's not like doing the
you
Ben
know-
Stiller thing where he's trying to like get in better shape for his roles. You know, it's like
No,
you're just doing the sitcom thing where it's like fat guy, hot wife, and whatever. And also, I feel like his early films, you look at the Happy Gilmores, the Billy Madisons, the Waterboys, they had a crassness to them.
They did.
Like a PG-13 safe, but still kind of a crass, like a little kid would kind of feel like, oh, this is a little bit of a dirty movie. He was transitioning hard into like this family comedy kind of style and motif where it's like, oh, this is fun for everybody. You're not going to get anything too edgy and whatnot in here. And it's like, I think, you know, for me, that's when I kind of started to tune out because I was becoming a teenager. I'm like, I don't want the family
I'm a
stuff.
bigger fan of like Anger Management with Jack Nicholson
Yes.
in 2003.
Yeah.
That one's excellent, but
Yeah.
still very good. Still hilarious, and I can watch it today. You know, I especially love the part where David Hasselhoff is he's sitting at his desk and then he kind of pauses it and smacks him around and then
Yeah,
and
there's a
then
scene where he kicks a
he's
guy in the
watching
nuts
for-
while he's
yeah.
got it paused.
You're
You know?
gonna feel that one later.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah,
some
there's-
of it he's got really good scenes in his movies,
Yeah.
no matter what it is.
yeah, not
Just-
hating on it.
yeah.
One that was a bit of a kind of like we talked about The Village being a disappointment as far as a movie I saw in theaters and you're kind of like let down by it. Superman Returns.
Okay.
What's your overall vibe on Superman Returns?
It's a movie for people who were
It's a movie.
yeah, there you go. And that's it. No, it's a movie for the people who really, really love and grew up with Christopher Reeve's Superman.
Which I know you did.
And yeah, I loved it. Thanks to my dad. It's not like we watch it all the time, but I remember really liking it. Really cool, classic, iconic theme song. But here's the thing: it kind of just it did the thing where the action to me is kind of not really
Prominent enough?
I don't know, like it's got glimpses of like spectacular scenes, like the airplane crash.
There's flashes of brilliance for sure.
yeah, the plane crash, but then like, you know, and he does the he thwarts the bank robbers or whatever, and they're shooting the gun up close, and then shoots him in the eye, and then it's got some of the score, the throwback score is really good when he's
sure.
sitting there floating in space, flashes of brilliance, but on the whole, it just kind of felt I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't grow up on that on those Superman films. I grew up on the Batman, the Keaton and Burton and Kilmer and Clooney Batman movies. I hadn't really seen or was familiar with the Christopher Reeve Superman films. But I remember watching. I remember my brother explaining to me like this is a sequel to the first two. So I watched the first two and I was like, oh well, these are kind of whatever. But like I'm really excited for this one. My brother took me to see it like around my birthday. I don't know if it was exactly the day of, and so I was like, we was very hyped. It was like one of the early times of my older brother being like, dude, I'm going to take you to a movie. Like, this is going to be cool. And, you know, if you like the opening sequences of it and the opening credits and the music are kind of like iconic and amazing. You're hearing the classic Brando speech and you see Krypton explode. And like, if you stop the movie after the opening credits, I'm like, I think we're in store for a masterpiece. And then it has great moments, but then at the end of it, it just feels like that didn't really kind of never get quite as epic or awesome as you thought it was going to be, you know. And so an imperfect movie, you know, it has flashes of brilliance, but just kind of just doesn't quite hit the home run.
Yeah, I also will say I think it is a little underrated because it's so overhated. It's kind of like cheap.
Yeah,
ways
it's
to
not the
describe
long,
it, but-
boring slog that everyone tries to put it into, but it's also, like, it definitely doesn't quite... But again, similar to X-Men The Last Stand, I think the hate is so popular that they're a little better than they get.
And I think
credit for.
Brandon Routh or Ruth,
He was good.
I think he's a good Superman. I
Yeah,
really do.
yeah,
But
he was solid.
But I do take issue with his costume in that movie
Yeah.
because it's a
bit too much.
It's trying to be such a modern take on a really retro look. I don't think it quite works, and the color was all. It just
If you
people talk about Man of Steel and Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill's Superman and his suit, but I think it's such a much better modern take on that than Returns.
Agreed. If you took some of the aesthetics of Man of Steel and placed them into Superman Returns, you'd have had a film, and I even would argue that the time to do a kind of weird retro sequel to the Christopher Reeve films was kind of gone by 2006. I think for the new millennium, the audience, after such a long hiatus, the audience was ready for the reboot. You drop the script of Man of Steel into the production and style of Superman Returns, and I think you get an excellent movie out of that. But neither here nor there.
The trunks didn't work for me.
Nah, I'm not with that style, not with that look. Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest becoming a $1 billion hit.
Gore Verbinski, dude, he makes some great films, and I miss his movies. It's been a while since I think The Cure for Wellness, kind of fast forwarding to whatever. And man, he, I think he did Rango before that, but I really miss his movies. Like, he's got such a vibe. He's the director when you're watching his movies.
Yeah.
And the Pirates, I know the sequels were not as loved
Here's
as...
the thing.
I think they're great.
I liked the first one quite a bit, but I remember watching the second one, and it was like a mind-blowing experience how much more I was clicked into that one than when I first saw the first one. And maybe it's as much of a difference between being 11 versus being like 14, It's like they're wordy scripts, they're kind of complex, they got a lot of character stuff, so it's like it's easy to kind of...
They're stuffy.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of maybe some of it's a little slightly like out of your wheelhouse, but by the time the second one came out, I was like, this is fantastic. I loved it. I remember it broke like the opening day and opening weekend record, and that's what started my lifelong obsession with like the box office numbers. Like I discovered boxofficemojo.com, and I'm like visiting there every day ever since.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, I know. Well, it still exists. It's just nowhere near as good as it used to be.
It's not what it was. It's
Never.
dead.
But I remember just always being obsessed with what's going to break the records and being shocked, like Titanic's #1. Like, what is this? But yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean 2 is good. 3, I'm not sure if it's as good as 2, but I think 2 and 3 in general are again, kind of overhated.
Especially when you put them up against the blockbusters especially from Disney, that we're getting nowadays. Dude.
Yeah, you want to talk about Alice in Wonderland 2, all this nonsense. It's like, doesn't have nothing on.
Well, plus, Dead Man's Chest won the Oscar for VFX that year.
Davy Jones
and
is
Davy
excellent.
Jones to this day looks incredible. People still talk about it all over Twitter.
One of the all-time great effects characters.
It's still, it really is. It's when I think of VFX characters, I think of Davy Jones. I think of the apes from the recent Planet of the Apes and Avatar. As far as characters go.
Yeah, when I kind of lay the timeline out, it's like the T-Rex, Jar Jar Binks, Gollum, Davy Jones, Avatar. Like that's like the progression of 20 years of from good to kind of flawless CGI. Here we go. Another misfire of M. Night Shyamalan, Lady in the Water.
Okay, I was actually a huge fan of this when it came out.
Okay.
Because I liked how weird it was.
Okay, then and I think you're a fan of it for the same reason I'm not really a fan of it. I'm like, this is a little weird, this is a little odd.
Yeah,
kind of doesn't do it for me.
And I like it didn't feel like a traditional movie, but then it also has like, I feel like it was trying to be so meta on the genre that it kind of fell into its own tropes. I don't want to sound so like preachy, but
I haven't rewatched it lately with a bit of a different mind. So like maybe the whole like leaning kind of into the tropes and playing against them. Maybe I'd have a bit more fun with that now.
I think it is overhated. It's got some really good elements, and I actually remember really liking the final act, the third act, and how it kind of he does this thing where he's able to bring in like really good like crescendo moments here of rising action to get the peak action and climax, and then it kind of just like, but the whole journey to get to that point kind of wasn't worth it.
Yeah, Bryce Dallas Howard is great, but it's just kind of an odd one.
And Paul Giamatti is excellent.
Yeah,
and he's always good.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on Little Miss Sunshine?
I never really watched like I wasn't into it when it was out.
It's not very much my kind of movie either.
And but I
it's
remember
notable.
watching it much later, and I remember Steve Carell, isn't that correct?
I think so.
Yeah,
Don't
Steve
sue
Carell.
me. Don't sue me. I don't know that movie very well.
Well, Steve Carell is in that, and I think he is. I don't want to say like certain words, but he's wants to like unalive himself, right? And I
Okay.
remember he's got like bandages on his wrist from trying that,
Oh.
and he's like this broken character. I just remember it being like Steve Carell.
Yeah.
That's and Paul Dano is in that.
Yeah,
Very
like Paul
quirky.
Dano before. Yeah. It's a that kind of movie, that sort of quirky awards darling thing. That's just not really my kind of movie. I remember all the previews for it. I'd be like, well, I'm not seeing that.
It is
you
funny.
know?
I remember it being funny.
Yeah. Talladega Nights was a good comedy for me that year when Will
Yes.
Ferrell was still really good.
Well, and I think isn't Christopher Nolan a huge Talladega Nights fan?
Oh, is he?
Dude, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I think recently he did a little video, like talking about physical media, and he was in like a thing, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm almost positive, and he
wow.
actually goes out and says that he really enjoys Talladega Nights.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good. It's a real, like, back when comedies were kind of also movies. They weren't in this weird comedy niche. It's like it's a pretty cool, fun, well-rounded comedy movie. Showed like the comedy chops of
Will Ferrell,
the co-star.
John C. Reilly.
Yeah, before like from what I understand, prior to that, he usually did a lot of dramatic roles, and
was
then
actually-
after that,
yeah.
he was in like comedies all
He was
over
in,
the
wasn't
place.
he in like Boogie Nights or Magnolia or
Yeah,
like
things
he's
like
been in
that.
like weird movies?
Yeah, he's
but
even in he's in Gangs of New York.
Yes,
and
you're
so,
right, yeah.
So yeah, and it's weird going back to that. I see Gangs of New York after, and it's like it's hard to take him seriously because it's such a goofy guy.
and, yeah.
World Trade Center, the first kind of 9/11 movie. I don't know if it's sort of the masterpiece 9/11 movie that I think will probably be made one day, but I remember it was kind of a big deal when that came out.
It's moving. It definitely is very moving.
Yeah,
at
it's
one
not a
point.
bad movie. Here's a movie where I think that they tried to lean into the meme and the meme didn't work, which was Snakes on a Plane.
Yeah.
Kind of doing it a little too early. And it's an example of not scary enough to be too scary to be funny, too funny to be scary. Tried to lean into the meme. Has the great line from Sam Jackson that but it's just, they tried to make it a big deal on the internet, and it was a fun meme on the internet, but that doesn't translate to box office success.
Yeah, I mean, Mother effing Sam Jackson that's who he is today. I think partly because of that. But
Yeah, exactly. A kind of a wild action movie with a favorite of the cast here, Jason Statham, Crank.
Oh, okay.
I remember it was such a wild. The style of that movie is so, as we've said, kinetic and wacky. Like, it knows no rules. It plays completely by its own perception of
It looks
reality.
so digital and so like handheld and so kinetic.
Yeah, and it's just a wild movie, and it just threw me for a loop at that time. I'm like, man, I didn't know movies could have this kind of energy to them.
Tell the listeners what Crank is about.
So
Some people might not know that.
Fair enough. Yeah. So Crank is about a guy it's about Jason Statham doing Jason Statham stuff. So he gets injected with something that's it's like a slow poison that's going to kill him. And the only way to kind of counteract the effects of this slow poison is to keep his adrenaline up. So the whole movie is like a 90-minute thing where he's got to like punch himself or stab himself in the hand or be behind a fast car or be in a shootout to keep his adrenaline up. And so, like, all of the hijinks that would come with that, while trying to murder the people who did it to him, is what that movie's about. And it's just a wild action movie.
And there's a crazy love scene in the middle of like a racetrack or a dog racing track
That's
or whatever.
the sequel.
Is that the sequel?
Yeah, the sequel is even more bonkers, which is weird. The first film
I thought that one was with Amy Smart, and she's in the
Amy
first
Smart's
one.
in both of them.
Okay.
In the first film, it's in Chinatown, and then in the
okay.
second film, it's the racetrack.
Oh, they do it
yeah.
in both?
Yeah, so it's a wild one. The second film is where he's got to keep an electrical charge, so he's like grabbing electrical wires and trying to create friction and things like that. But they're wild. I mean, they're not great cinema, but they're wild action movies for sure. And the first one's a bit more normal than the second one. The second one gets really off the rails, but
It's almost like as if like it's a proto version of that movie Hardcore Henry, but not in
Yeah.
first person.
Yeah, a little bit. That kind of just balls to the
Crazy.
wall kind of an action movie. Yeah. Another underrated comedy, Idiocracy. People
That's on my
always
list.
say maybe Idiocracy was right and maybe it's coming true. Maybe we're living in it.
You know what's awesome about that little trivia is I think in the clothing department or makeup or whatever it was, when they were trying to decide what shoes they were going to wear in the future, they were trying to find something really cheap, but that wasn't common and that kind of looked futuristic. And you know what shoes they went with?
Oh gosh.
Crocs.
Oh really?
Yes.
Wow.
So if you look back, Idiocracy, they're all wearing Crocs.
Wow.
And this is before Crocs took over the world.
Idiocracy was up on the game on Crocs.
Dude, totally.
Wow.
And they got them on the cheap, and it was just like this thing where, you know, they're kind of like predicting the future, but
Yeah.
you know,
And look what became popular, something that was cheap and stupid and easy, and people don't have shoelaces to put them on and all this other nonsense.
Yeah, it's right on the cover. They're wearing Crocs.
And certainly the quality of the films they watch in Idiocracy is very much, you know, it's very relevant to the quality of films we're getting on screen these days.
Yeah, that movie is very much, we talked about in the last episode, that same kind of comedy as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but it works so much
Idiocracy
better.
totally works.
It's so much better, dude.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be the stupidest movie ever, and just the more you watch it, you're like, oh my god, this is kind of perfect, you know? It's kind of hilarious.
Electrolytes. It's what the plants need.
Yeah. It's wild. It's a wild movie.
And then, you know, a lot of people, not to get political, but, you know, look at the president, Mundo, whatever.
Yeah.
He's like sticking his middle finger up, and it's
it's interesting.
Terry Crews, right?
Yeah, Terry
He's
Crews.
riding on a motorcycle.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. It's kind of sad, but kind of amazing. Another sort of memeable movie is The Wicker Man with Nicolas Cage. You know, every time I think of that movie, I just think, not the bees, not the bees.
Gosh,
yeah, and he's like, isn't there a sequence in that movie where he's like punching ladies while he's dressed as a bear? Like, it's just like a wild kind of a movie.
It was the precursor to Midsummer.
Yeah, I suppose. Jet Li's Fearless.
Oh, yep, that's a good one.
Quite a cool, very visually stylish Chinese film? Japanese film?
One of those.
Now I feel awful.
You're going to get roasted.
But it's a Jet Li movie, and I like Jet Li. And it's an awesome movie, you know.
Yeah.
The visuals are great. I haven't seen it in years, but I remember it just looked spectacular anytime you'd see the previews and trailers.
Yeah, and he was still pretty big on those. You know, he had Romeo Must Die. You know, The Cradle to the Grave. He had all these, like, he was doing those Kung
Unleashed.
Fu. Unleashed.
Yeah.
You know, that one I think was pretty hardcore, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he was still doing those around that time. He was still very, very prominent in that scene.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, a little bit more of a higher tier level of film here. The Departed.
Best picture of that year.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you for calling that one out. Great DiCaprio. I mean, the cast is excellent.
It's a remake of a Korean movie, isn't it?
A trilogy of them, the
Infernal
Affairs, yeah. And so I haven't seen that trilogy to like do a heavy compare and contrast. And crime movies aren't totally in my wheelhouse, so it's not like I'm the world's biggest Departed fan. But Jack Nicholson, Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, Leonardo DiCaprio, like, dude, excellent.
And they are firing on all cylinders in that movie as far as acting goes.
Yeah.
And to me, that movie, and I'm not... It's Shakespearean. It's modern Shakespeare, especially, no spoilers.
Vera Farmiga is in that movie,
yeah,
right?
She is, yeah. And she's, look, I had a crush on her in that. When she was in that, she's very, very good in that. But it's modern Shakespeare in the fact that, no spoilers, but the ending, how it plays out with what happens to certain characters and how it happens.
And it's this tumbling effect that it's like the ending is just you're in a constant state of shock for like 10 minutes straight, you know?
The Departed is so good. Yeah. And at the time, I think it had the record for like the most F-bombs for like any movie ever.
Which is nice. We won't blurt it out here, but one of my favorite lines that Mark Wahlberg has in that movie is goes, maybe not. Maybe go after yourself. Like, that's the greatest way to...
He was nominated for that, for being in that movie for like 20 minutes.
Marky Mark, of all people. Like, good for him. And the very on-the-nose final shot of the movie with the rat walking across the window frame. Like, I remember someone was very cross about that. They were like, he had to be that obvious and overt for them to finally give him Best Picture. He's like, that's how dumb the Academy is. I'm like, dude, whatever works. The movie deserves Best Picture.
I agree.
All right. Little double feature I want to mention here. Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima.
Was Letters the same year?
Yeah, one was kind of October-ish, and then one was like the end of the year. One, Flags of Our Fathers is sort of the American counterpart from Clint Eastwood, and Letters from Iwo Jima is sort of Japanese companion film to it. You know, great World War II movies.
Yeah, the first one's a little less on the action. It's more about the soldiers who actually raised the flag on Iwo Jima and the photograph and the kind of, you know, the weight that came with all that and the press and all that and them trying to sell bonds. That's a good one, but I think the better movie is Letters from Iwo Jima.
I'd agree
by
with that.
far.
I'd agree
It's
with
got
that.
Ken Watanabe in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a bonus.
Dude, he brings such
weight,
gravitas.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to be one of those, use one of those words.
Yeah.
That one is, I think maybe not for cinephiles, but for most people, I think that one is severely underrated as far as the upper echelon of war movies.
And I think a lot of people sort of, when it was kind of this companion piece film, I think a lot of American viewers, critics, audiences might have just said, well, that's the one for the Japanese. So it's sort of overlooked and disregarded. It's like, no, like they almost work great as a two-piece.
Now, I just thought of this right this second. You could watch Letters from Iwo Jima now and then do a double feature with Godzilla Minus One.
Oh, that would probably be a great double feature. I think that would be pretty excellent.
Yeah.
We might have to, we'll do an episode that's just about like fun companion pieces and fun double features and movies that aren't really
Like
connected,
thematic
but feel connected.
counterparts.
Yeah, because that's one of my favorite things to do. I love stuff like that. All right, we're into the trashy October horror movie phase here. Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. I remember kind of sneaking into that with some friends. And
Which one is the one with Daddario in it?
okay, that's Texas Chainsaw 3D from a number of years later. That's
Okay.
like 2013.
That's the one that most people.
That's
I
the
think,
one you
remember.
love, I bet. So here's the thing: Texas Chainsaw: The Beginning is not like a Sahara Desert in that department either. But Jessica Biel was in the 2003 one. Jessica Biel was the 2003 one. The 2006 has like Jordana Brewster and
the
and
2003 was
I kind of always preferred the prequel because it's more of a. When I was into horror movies, I kind of was into like the bad guy wins, all the characters kind of don't have a great ending, kind of an ending story, the bad guy wins story. So it being Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning kind of ends a certain way. So I always preferred it. It was just a little more hardcore than the 2003 one, but whatever. Saw 3 kind of concluding the Saw trilogy there. I think if I were to recommend that to new fans, I'd kind of probably maybe just tell them to stop at 3.
I'm not huge on the Saw franchise. I think, a lot of people love that franchise. For me personally, growing up, I kind of like...
It hasn't aged terribly well.
I didn't really avoid movies like that, but I definitely wasn't like super into the torture porn stuff.
Yeah.
But I will say that the first movie is a movie, and then that kind of devolved from there.
Yeah, the first one almost feels like very like 7-ish, and then it feels like it gets more like lower class as it continues.
It had the Final Destination effect.
And again, as a teenager, I was super into all of these, but now it's like they're not my thing. I don't touch them.
I heard that the newest one was actually fairly good, so good for that.
I mean, considering how bad the last several have been leading into that one,
not a
I'm
high bar.
sure a rebound was probably pretty easy to do. All right, here we're gonna get into a bit more prestigious kind of cinema here. The Prestige from Christopher Nolan.
Okay.
Starring Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman.
Amazing movie.
Yeah, great. It's sort of a dueling magicians kind of a movie, not in the fantasy sense of throwing laser bolts at each other. They are real magicians who do real tricks on stage and performance, and they're sort of competing with their ambitions to do the greatest tricks for the audiences and to command the most audiences. And it's really interesting because it's all about showmanship and mystery, and it's very much, people have pointed this out about a lot of Christopher Nolan films, but this is one where I feel it a lot. It's very metaphorical for how maybe directors feel with their relationship to the audience. And Hugh Jackman gives this great speech in the movie about seeing the look on the audience's faces when you could genuinely fool them or genuinely impress them. I'm like, that just feels like the director speaking his feelings about cinema into the world.
Well, we can get more into it, but we're going to do a Nolan filmography as our first director kind of study.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be very soon. Probably we'll kick off 2024 with that. So let's save a little bit of that
For sure.
nuance for sure. But, dude, The Prestige, and right off the heels of Batman Begins, the previous year,
Yeah.
I think, and that one's like one of those twisty movies,
Yeah, it's got lots of great twists and turns and stuff, and I'm always into movies like that.
And I gotta say, I love the inclusion of the character of Tesla, who was
Nikola Tesla, played by David Bowie.
David Bowie, I think, just makes that movie.
And Christopher Nolan doing a bold thing for 2006, which was casting Andy Serkis as not a CGI character.
Right,
Andy
right.
Serkis was Gollum and King Kong, and then Christopher Nolan, because he's this great character actor. He's this great sort of side character kind of presence, and Christopher Nolan put him in like this kind of small role, but it's like he kills it in it,
Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but maybe I can predict the next movie you're going to talk about. I know it's very similar.
Okay, similar.
Oh, you're going by chronology, aren't you?
I'm going a little chronology, but mention it. Go ahead, go.
I was going to say, because that year we had that one, and it's one of these things where Hollywood does this all the time, like Armageddon, Deep Impact.
Yeah.
We also had The Illusionist.
Yeah, and I totally blackballed The Illusionist off of my list. I thought maybe you would mention it.
Yeah.
I was ready to do the full blown look over the movie. I was like, I'm not putting it on the list.
No, I think it's just noteworthy because it did drop that year.
Yeah.
Edward Norton. It's not bad at all. It's good.
No,
it's
no,
good.
yeah,
It's
I'm
very
not
good.
hating on it. It's well done. And Edward Norton, I think, is perpetually kind of underrated. I hear he's kind of challenging to work with, so maybe that's part of it. But
Was he always challenging, or is that a more recent thing? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, and when the studio says you're challenging on the Incredible Hulk, it's like, why? Because he was trying to make a good movie. It's like, I don't, where are these stories come from? But
Well, he's in Fight Club, and then
yeah.
then from there on, he's like, I'm the greatest.
Yeah, I suppose. I was gonna mention Borat, just an R-rated raunchy comedy.
Borat was huge.
Sacha Baron Cohen. Yeah, it was a huge film. Like I said, raunchy as all heck. Not sure I would laugh nearly as much as that movie as an adult, but had to mention it. All right, here we go. Following in the heels of the Batman Begins Batman reboot in 2005, the Bond franchise kind of did a similar thing with Casino Royale, kind of relaunching the Bond franchise, and I'm quite a big fan of this one.
Yeah, I am too. I love it.
Daniel Craig's pretty solid Bond. Doesn't really look, when I think of the look of Bond, I always think of Pierce Brosnan, but Daniel Craig has a good screen presence. Eva Green's in it. She's awesome. Matt Mikkelsen is the villain, and he's great as the villain,
I remember at that time, it wasn't, I don't think as good as that movie is, it wasn't, I didn't recognize it until a little bit after
Definitely.
the fact. And hindsight is 2020. When I look at it now, and most people agree, there's an argument to be made that it is the best James Bond movie ever made.
Definitely an argument to be made, because
Yeah.
I think I would maybe argue with it, but it's up there. That's the thing. It's excellent. It's really good.
It's certainly many people. Now, look, I understand the later ones like Skyfall, exceptional, whatever, but a lot of people really think Casino Royale is the best Craig Bond, and he set the stage for well, so did the crew and everybody else
Yeah.
and the producers, but they set the stage for the modern take of his character.
And directed by Martin Campbell, who directed Goldeneye. So he rebooted Bond twice with a new actor and hit
Both
it out
of
of the
them.
park both
Yeah.
times, and both are considered greats. And Casino Royale is definitely awesome, so shout out to it. A really underrated, kind of odd movie, but I think a unique one and an interesting one is The Fountain with Hugh Jackman.
Yep.
Rachel Weisz. I remember the concept of it was infinitely interesting to me. This sort of story told in, 3 time eras of the sort of Spanish conquistadors and a modern setting, and then a sort of future post-apocalyptic kind of sci-fi setting. And it's low budget, but manages to pull that off. And Hugh Jackman gives an insane performance in that movie. There's scenes in it that are just gut-wrenching.
That's a cult classic.
Yeah, Darren Aronofsky kind of firing. He got a lot of praise and notoriety for his next film, but I feel like the world missed the boat because that movie was just so ambitious for what it was. And I was obsessed with it for a whole summer. And, maybe it's not a perfect movie, but it's really short, but somehow still really epic. And it just flies by when I watch it. It's great. Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. You ever see that one?
Yeah.
Switching lanes here,
Yeah.
It's like a comedy musical, but it's whatever.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's a funny movie. Mel Gibson's Apocalypto.
Yep, that's on my list. I'm glad you mentioned
Yeah,
that one.
excellent. Just great Gibson filmmaking. Subtitled. One of the early movies that I was able to stand watching subtitled as a teenager. I used to never watch movies if they were subtitled, but that one's so good.
Yeah, I had that one on DVD. I watched it all the time.
Yeah, the visual storytelling is so good. A lesser known DiCaprio film, Blood Diamond.
Blood Diamond.
Not my favorite movie, but solid. Kind of rolling into the end of the year here. Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. Kind of him.
That was his last $100 million plus domestic box office movie.
Really?
Yeah, because the next one...
No, he did I Am Legend the next year.
Was that the next year?
Yeah.
Okay, well, what I meant
Maybe
to
you're
say
talking
is
about dramas or something?
it's the same director went on to direct 7 Pounds.
Okay, yeah, 7 Pounds didn't do it for sure. But Pursuit of Happiness, solid. Not, I'm not the drama guy, but it's legit.
That's very good. Very
Yeah.
good. And when he finally gets told that he's got the job, and the famous shot of him
Yeah.
clapping, and
Yeah,
it's good. It's gold.
It hits for sure. Sylvester Stallone came back pretty hard with Rocky Balboa. I think a very underrated kind of sports drama movie. It's one of those legacy sequels, maybe an early example of it.
Yeah.
And the speech he gives to his son about, not how hard you hit, but how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That stuff lands every single time for me.
Yeah.
Super underrated movie.
Yeah, for me, I give the edge. We'll talk about it in some other podcast someday, but I'll give the edge slightly to the first Creed. over
See,
Rocky Balboa just ever so slightly.
I think I go Rocky Balboa in that debate. And then a notable sci-fi film from the conclusion of 2006, Children of Men.
Yep, that's on my list.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is one of those movies where it's not like a favorite movie to rewatch, but I would say that movie is a masterpiece of filmmaking all around. You have which guy was it? Alfonso Cuarón?
Yeah.
Yeah. He has a couple of wonders in the end there that are just breathtakingly made. The craft on display in that movie is just absolute. And I know that movie's like mostly famous for the wonder in the car,
Yeah.
where with Julianne Moore, but the movie on the whole, like, just an incredibly realized fantasy about the future without children.
Yeah.
You know, where the youngest person was only 18 years old.
Yeah.
You know?
And one of those films where I like the aesthetics and the sort of filmmaking a lot more than kind of the film itself, but you can't disrespect that film.
Yeah.
All right. Any stragglers from 2006 you want to
Just
mention?
one, because you covered all mine except for one.
Sure.
I want to shout out to a monster movie, Host.
Okay.
Bong Joon-ho had his
Yeah.
foreign. Now, a lot of people know Bong Joon-ho from from Parasite, you know, a couple years ago. But I've been a huge fan of his since Parasite, or not Parasite, Host, and then also Memoirs of a Murder, whatever. It's another one of his films.
Yeah.
Kind of underrated, underlooked, but because he is now the director he is and very recognized, a lot of people have since discovered his filmography.
Digging back into the filmography, yeah. And the Host, I remember the big deal about it because people were making a big deal about Weta Digital doing the effects for it, even though it wasn't a Hollywood production. Yeah, it's a really cool movie. Great movie.
And on the record, I'm a big fan of Snowpiercer. I know kind of hit or miss.
See, okay, was that also him?
Yeah,
Because I really dug Snowpiercer. Like, it's not like a masterpiece, but there's some awesome sections and sequences in that movie. Like, really big fan of Snowpiercer. Okay, so we'll move on to 2007 here and blast through some of these. All right, Smoking Ace is kind of a wild, 2000s high energy ensemble movie. I love the ensemble aspect of it, and you've got characters that are like major stars that get killed after like 3 scenes. I just like that.
Bonus points for that. Anytime a movie kills off a main character, like especially unceremoniously,
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, cool.
And
good on
Smoking
ya.
Aces is one of those movies where it's like a total like 7 out of 10 movie, but it's got a 10 out of 10 ending, so it kind of elevates it. Ryan Reynolds kind of doing a really solid job in that film. Weird Misfire, Bridge to Terabithia, marketed as if it was like Chronicles of Narnia, but it's actually this like really sad drama.
Dude, so sad. I cried.
Yeah. Dude, you do
It's
not
gut-wrenching.
you do not see that movie coming. So I mean, special shout out to it. It's like all the trailers make it look like Narnia, and then like I remember my cousins were obsessing over it. I'm like, really? Like the Cheapo Depot Narnia? They're like, no, Chris, it's something different. Like we watched it, we like all watched the DVD, and I'm like holding back tears at the end of the movie. I'm like, this isn't okay,
God, poor Josh Hutcherson, man.
Yeah, it's a brutal movie. Ghost Rider, Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider.
It's not
just
great.
wanted to throw it out there. It's good enough to walk out of and sneak into 300. I'll say that.
And maybe I'm skipping ahead, but it might be even post 2010. But the directors of Crank did the sequel.
Yeah, and I mean, better or worse, I don't know. Hard to say.
I don't remember much of it.
Yeah. Jim Carrey trying to do a serious thriller with The Number 23. I remember the only lasting effect that movie really had on me was that it made me notice anytime 23 came up in my life. So
That's I think true for everybody. That was a misfire.
yeah. Zodiac. David Fincher killing it with Zodiac, a thriller based on the Zodiac killer, real life Zodiac killer who was never officially caught.
No.
And great Jake Gyllenhaal role, great kind of in the midst of the comeback for Robert Downey Jr.
RDJ, yeah.
After Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, before Iron Man, and Mark Ruffalo, who's perpetually always in like the third guy role in these kind of movies. He's never the number 1 lead. He's always like the co-lead or the number 3 guy or the romantic interest in these movies carried by female
carries
stars.
a lot.
Yeah, but it's like he, pulling his fair share. Zodiac is just it's not a horror movie, but it's such a compelling real life depiction of crime and the mystery of it.
Yeah, I don't want to keep throwing out the M word so much, but I think that is also a masterpiece of filmmaking. I think it's one of Fincher's best, and it's
I think one of his most underrated. Like it's one that should be in the conversation for his best that never seems to be mentioned. They
I
always
agree.
want to mention
Yeah.
Seven and the other things, and it's like Zodiac is actually insanely legit.
and it is a long movie, and but it is just, man, it's so good, and there are so many layers to it, you know, and
And I'm not a big advocate for the slow burn movies, but that's one of those where I would recommend it and say, look, it's long. It takes a time to do what it's doing, but it's so worth it.
yeah, and that's a movie where it does one of these things where it can terrify you in a couple of scenes, and it's not even like a horror movie.
Purely with tension.
Just, specifically the young couple in the car,
Yep.
and then the couple at the lake. Mm-hmm. Watching that, it is so unsettling.
And even when he's in the house with the guy, and you just do not know which direction this movie's turning, and it just really is like, oh snap, like oh crap.
It's so good.
Yeah, followed up almost immediately by 300, which was just, I mean,
Masterpiece.
that's some
Masterpiece.
that's some peak cinema. Like, my dad took me to see that movie. I'm 14 years old. It's so stylish, so cool. I loved Dawn of the Dead, same director. Just action, visuals. It's like all of the sort of epicness and awesomeness from Lord of the Rings trilogy crammed into a single 2-hour movie and just dialed up to 11. Like, there was a point in time where I could probably recite almost every line of dialogue from that movie.
Yeah, a lot of nerds talk about cultural impact and how movies don't seem to whatever, Snyder this, Snyder that. 300 had cultural impact on the industry. The style that he kind of, I don't want to say pioneered, but he kind of just like made popular.
People yelling out, even just as much as the meme of yelling out, "This is Sparta," like that was everywhere.
It's a for me, you watch that, it is like a testosterone boost,
Pure adrenaline.
I feel just like, oh, it's
a man's man kind of a movie.
Yeah, it's so awesome, so good, infinitely rewatchable, super fun.
Gotcha. Grindhouse, a rare misfire from Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah,
the concept of 2 feature-length horror movies being played back-to-back as a single showing called Grindhouse, where they each went off, Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino each made their kind of B-movie, horror movie homage, and then they marketed them, promoted them together, and it was just a huge kind
of 70s exploitation.
Exactly, and neither of them really work at all.
I gotta say, I know Death Proof has its fans, and there's some cool little things here and there, but Planet Terror
I prefer
plays much better, not only as an entertaining movie, but almost satirical and kind of like.
I think Quentin Tarantino
just
kind of
so fun.
doesn't know how to make a movie that leans into kind of being a bad exploitation movie. It's like he's trying too hard to still make a normal movie, and it's like to the detriment of that experiment.
You have like extreme gore. What's her name? The actress who gets the AR as a leg.
Rose McGowan.
Yeah, Rose. She's sitting there like swinging around on the floor, shooting zombies, and they're just explode.
Yeah,
it's such a fun time. It's so schlocky and like
that movie was never going to make money in theaters because it's basically a 4-hour movie. Like the showtimes, it's one showtime and you're seeing 2 movies, and like they were trying to lean into this 2 for the price of one thing, but it's like you get like 2 screenings of that in a day, and just horrible. Here's the movie that I thought you were talking of when you brought up Frailty the other day. It's called Fracture with Anthony Hopkins, where like the whole thing is like he shoots his wife and like tells the guy who's investigating that he did it, but like he can't prove it. Right. It's this great battle of wits. That's the movie I was thinking of when you mentioned Frailty. Hot Fuzz from the folks who brought us Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, the second part of the trilogy.
Yeah, the Cornetto trilogy or whatever. Yeah, so great action comedy. Like really underrated action comedy.
Very funny.
Has a lot of good moments. May 2007 brought us a triple threat of trilogy cappers. Spider-Man 3, Shrek the Third, and Pirates of the Caribbean 3.
Yep.
I think now, judging them, I mean, Shrek the Third obviously is out. That's not the best of the 3. Mm-hmm. I'd say Spider-Man 3, I think. I think Spider-Man 3 is better than Pirates 3.
Yeah, Pirates 3 is so convoluted plot-wise. Like, it is so stuffed.
There's a lot going on.
A lot of people's motives change, and they start taking sides and this and that. It becomes hilarious almost.
It's almost absurdist.
It is, and I think my favorite part of the movie, honestly, is when they're walking on the beach and it's shaped like a guitar, and the guitar music kicks in, and then it pans over, and you see Davy Jones standing in a bucket of water
because he can't stand on land.
And I'm like, oh well, if you could do that, what's the big deal?
I never noticed that the land was shaped like a guitar.
It's shaped like a daggone guitar.
What an on the nose thing! I'm like, I don't know if that makes me like it more or less because everyone remembers the guitar strings plucking. That's one of the highlight moments of that score.
No, I like it.
Scene.
I like it a lot. The CGI is great. I love the whole scene of them getting married and Barbossa's officiating while
fighting.
Yeah.
Great absurdist humor.
And then I like it again, as I previously mentioned earlier with I forgot which movie, but it's got a finality to it, like character stories that come to an end, and not counting the sequels that kind of don't exist later. We don't, whatever. But I really like all 3 of those. Shrek the Third is kind of
we're kind of out of the animated movie crowd here. Michael Bay's Transformers, the first one.
I unironically love that movie.
No, I'll defend it forever. 15-year-old taken by my dad to go see it, and then our reactions were so positive that later my older brother, then took me to go see it a second time. I remember he was like, he saw some TV spot for him, was like, why didn't they show any of this awesome stuff in the first trailers for the movie? I'm like, man, like, it's crazy. So awesome movie. I'll defend that movie forever.
It hit at the right time. Also, we're in high school, and
Megan Fox,
and every single thing about it, and
the cars,
huge
the
fan
effects.
of Transformers. The effects are incredible. The sound design. I say this a lot. He was firing on all cylinders. Michael Bay and crew. They were just killing it at that time.
The right movie, right place, right time, right ingredients.
Yeah, Shia LaBeouf. Looking back, he's a little annoying. If I gotta say, like his kind of the way he does his kinetic or frantic acting.
Yeah,
but still,
he's kind of a not as slick Jeff Goldblum in the way that as the dialogue's coming out of his mouth, it sounds like he's making it up as he's speaking it. It doesn't sound rehearsed or whatever. So that's cool, but it's a little grating. But he is a teenager, so I mean, it's kind of on point for the character. He's supposed to be kind of dweeby,
Yeah, I know a lot of people would prefer like Bumblebee as like a better film, but to this day, I think that Transformers the first one, is the best of all of them. I don't think they get any better.
I agree. That was the peak.
Yeah, it's not a perfect movie, but I love it.
Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Again,
not my favorite Harry Potter. Not anybody's.
I wasn't on board with the franchise at this point. I had kind of dipped out already, but, deserves a mention. What do you think of Danny Boyle's Sunshine?
I love it. I don't like the ending, but I love it.
Yeah, kind of the third act where it kind of becomes more of a semi-slasher movie, you know?
Yeah, great cast. Are you kidding me?
Awesome cast.
Amazing cast.
And some folks kind of before they blew up, Chris Evans is in there, you know?
Cillian Murphy. I've been a huge fan of him since that movie, maybe even before that. I know he was
Scarecrow.
He was in
28 Days Later.
And Girl with the Pearl Earring, which I know is a weird movie, but he's in that. Or a weird mention, I gotta say.
Yeah.
But yeah, 28 Days Later. I glossed over that one before.
You don't think of it as a Cillian Murphy movie.
That was one of those early digital movies that does not look
it
great.
looks like garbage. Visually, the digital cinematography looks like terrible.
But the music is famous in that one.
Yep.
And
everyone's really on point in that. And it's certainly way better than any of the sequels. But yeah, Sunshine, underrated sci-fi, like low-budget sci-fi.
Yeah, I really like it a lot.
Bourne Ultimatum, another kind of good trilogy capper there.
Yeah.
And I think the strongest of the original three.
Yeah, and the Bourne series did the best of that shaky cam action.
They kind of made it popular and ruined the action genre for like 10 years.
Dude, people mimicked that for
horribly.
years to come.
Yeah.
They just didn't do it right.
The way to mask up poor choreography or lack of choreography and actors that were pretending to be stunt people but weren't good at it was just shake the camera up and make it really kinetic and intense. But it's horrible to watch. It's really unnerving. And the Bourne movies do it pretty well.
How many times have you seen a movie now where like the main action guy will grab a book and like use the book as a thing?
Roll it up.
And we're like, do something to that effect.
With some impractical object. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I always love it at the very end, the song by... what's his name?
Moby
kicking in at the very end every time. I love that.
Extreme Ways.
Yeah,
it's always some slightly different version of it. That it's this great kind of meme within the franchise, and like
But when he's floating in the water at the end of that one, and it kicks in,
yes,
that was awesome.
It's so good. It's like just such a hell yeah kind of a moment.
And then Bourne Legacy, quick mention on there, doesn't do it
for me.
That's when Hollywood was on the Jeremy Renner train trying to make him, and it just didn't work.
They were trying to find a franchise for him to take over. They tried Mission Impossible. They tried Bourne.
That's right.
No, none of it's going to be his. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2007, kind of an awful remake of the original, but in and of itself a decent slasher movie. Again, kind of a trashy movie that I wouldn't really go back to these days, but at the time, pretty hardcore.
They have a place in Hollywood and in filmmaking and everything where slasher movies like that, they don't have to be good. They just have to be fun.
It's called the garbage can. That's their place.
They just have to be fun, and you get all different flavors of absurdist slasher movies or, whatever.
People have described Rob Zombie's type of horror as white trash horror, and I don't know if that's necessarily a term of endearment or an insult, but it's kind of on point. A lot of foul language. They're always... He shoots on, I think some of his films he even shoots 16 millimeter to make them even grainier and kind of grungier, and it's like... They're really dirty movies. Like, not necessarily... Like, yes, in the content, but also, like, they just feel aesthetically kind of filthy, Shoot 'Em Up, a pretty decent action movie with Clive Owen. Yeah, I was a big fan of Clive Owen coming off of Sin City, so I kind of
There's a wild action sequence in that where he's jumping out of the plane, and he's like, there's a shootout falling through the sky. Remember that?
That whole movie has wild action scenes in it. Yeah, but yeah, it's a fun little one. Not a great movie necessarily, but it's fun. Here's some schlock for you: Dragon War. You ever see D War? Dragon Wars.
With the dragon that wrapped around the building, right?
Yes, a South Korean movie with a huge budget for a South Korean film, filmed with American actors because the director thought that was going to be like the secret ingredient to global success, and then it just kind of came and went. Like,
I like that movie. When I was younger.
It's a great like bad B movie, but it's total nonsense.
It's like upper tier sci-fi original.
Yeah, it's like they're trying. Yeah, it's like the sci-fi original script and caliber, but with like 4 times the budget, which is interesting. Resident Evil 3, kind of not that great of a movie. I remember
they devolved.
I feel like they repeat the main musical theme of that movie like 18 times throughout the film. So whatever. Gone Baby Gone. Ben Affleck's directorial debut.
Very good movie.
Yeah.
Casey Affleck is an amazing actor. Regardless of what you think about him and his personal life and whatever. That aside, we don't try not to get into that. He's an amazing actor, and that's a really good movie. Really strong debut.
Excellent. People have talked about how actors make good transitions into directors, and I think I tend to believe that more so than other folks. No Country for Old Men, Coen Brothers, Peak.
One of those movies where it's one of my favorites, and I think it's one of the best movies ever made.
It's exceptional. If you have not seen that, do yourself a favor.
Javier Bardem is an icon because of that
haunting
movie. Yeah, and like Anton Chigurh, his character is just, it's so good, and it's actually like memeable nowadays.
Yeah, and even the way they do a great job of building him up with what he does, but also with how other people refer to him. When Josh Brolin's like, who's this guy supposed to be, the ultimate badass?
Yeah.
Like, that's great. Like, that gives you a sense of what these characters are like. Beowulf as the all CGI Robert Zemeckis experiment continuing.
He never left that train, did he?
Yeah, he eventually did because they wouldn't make money. They wouldn't fund him. By the time he got to Flight with Denzel, he was going back to normal movies. But
then he did a new one with Steve Carell where they're like,
did he?
Toys. They're dolls.
Oh yeah, that weird Welcome to Marlowe movie. Yeah, okay.
He tried it one more time.
Beowulf's a pretty cool movie. It's that style. It was, I don't mean to say ahead of its time, but it was too soon to try and lean into that full CGI style. But Beowulf is pretty legit. The score's really good. Alan Silvestri always delivers good scores, And
the lead actor, his voice, what's his name?
Ray Winstone.
Or
Ray Winestone.
Yeah, whatever. He's great. That movie kind of like disturbed me. Some scenes where I'm like watching this and it's an animated thing.
Yeah.
But then like when Grendel comes in and like starts biting people and ripping their
legs off and
like,
stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
dang.
It catches you off guard because you don't expect a cartoon to be so violent. It catches you off guard. The movie with maybe the most depressing ending I've ever seen is The Mist.
Yes.
Frank Darabont, great director, great filmmaker, kind of doing a horror thriller, and Thomas Jane as Zane Jane. I've heard it pronounced kind of all kind of weird ways, but great kind of ensemble thriller. I love horror movies that are kind of isolated incident kind of movies in like a store or a cabin or a spaceship or a facility, that kind of just a select limited amount of cast, and it's just like a pressure cooker, kind of goes back to the Night of the Living Dead style, and The Mist is one of those movies, and the ending of it is just gut-wrenching.
Yeah, it's gut-wrenching in the fact that it's, even if like the very end, because I don't want to spoil it if nobody's ever seen it here, but even if like the final ending didn't happen, the few seconds prior to that are still terrible.
It's a gut wrench, and then another one. It doubles down on top of it. And I remember the director, because that's not the ending of the novella or graphic novel is apparently much more open ended, and the director went dark with his ending. And Stephen King, who wrote it, sent him a message saying like, some characters in fiction are the characters that are designated for just the whole universe to come down hard on, and then you have that character at the end of this movie. So wild.
Real quick, that reminds me of when you brought up Frank Darabont, two that I kind of missed for the early 2000s. Quick shout out, one, and because they're both Tom Hanks, and he directed The Green Mile.
Okay. Oh, great movie.
Yeah, I totally forgot that one.
Was that in 2000?
Yeah.
2001?
No, it was like 2002 or 3,
okay.
like around 2001.
So good.
Yeah,
so good.
Michael Clark Duncan. And what was the villain's name? Not the villain, but the bad guy who everybody hated.
Was it something like Percy or something like that?
I don't know.
It's one of those kind of names, though.
But we had that one, and I also missed Castaway.
Golly,
Yeah.
yeah, Castaway was iconic.
Castaway.
Like everyone
What
knows
about?
it.
I keep missing these Tom Hanks movies because
Yeah,
in the
what's up with you?
in the
Tom
first
Hanks
in the
is
'90s
really
one,
great.
I forgot Saving Private
Yeah,
Ryan.
yeah.
Anyways.
Tom Hanks is those are peak times for Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
You know, moving along, a great sort of indie success story, Juno,
Juno,
with Ellen Page and Michael Cera, and
now Elliot Page, but
yeah,
that's some-
circa 2007. If we're talking of it as if it's 2007, the credits say Ellen Page and Michael Cera.
who was also in Last Stand.
Yeah, and I remember everyone like that was just one of those movies. I remember spending a whole like video production class with one of our friends holding the phone, and we all just watched it off of his phone. It was just one of those movies that everyone dug when you were in high school.
And I like Jason Bateman in that. He ends up being like kind of a bad guy.
Yeah.
But you know, that's the woman, I forgot who wrote that movie, but she also wrote Jennifer's Body.
Diablo Cody.
Yeah. I liked her the writing. It was that
It worked perfectly for Juno, not so much for Jennifer's Body.
You know, Juno. Oh, like the city in Alaska? No, not
Yeah,
like that. Like
exactly.
that banter. Like yeah, the script was excellent for that.
Exactly.
I think did it win? I think
It won a lot of stuff. Yeah, it
wanna
was
say
very
it won an
celebrated in the
Oscar.
award season. All right, the fall of New Line Cinema as a standalone production company and not until they got folded into a division of Warner Brothers. The Last Mimsy and Golden Compass, two mega flops that after that. New Line Cinema made the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the biggest trilogy of all time, $3 billion in box office, $3 billion in post-theatrical sales, all the Oscars, all the awards. And then 4 years later, these two flops lead to New Line Cinema being sort of shuttered as a standalone studio, and now it's simply a division of Warner Brothers.
And the Golden Compass actually won the Oscar for Best VFX.
Which was a robbery.
Robbery.
Transformers should have won 100%. Or any other blockbuster that year more
Yeah.
than the Golden
What did
Compass.
the polar bear get him to win? I don't
And
understand.
that polar bear, I remember one of our buddies, Brian, was he made a
Yeah,
remark.
shout
He
out
goes,
Brian.
yeah, exactly. He just goes, I could totally tell that polar bear was fake. Like he was a great sarcastic guy, you know. I Am Legend was December of 2007. Loved that. One of the few. I used to really hate the hero dies at the end kind of a movies, and now I guess I Am Legend is not a hero dies at the end movie, depending on the ending you watch.
They got the
but-
sequel coming out soon.
yeah, but I Am Legend's good. Kind of not really great CGI because they kept switching between practical effects and CGI. So, you know, the Alien vs. Predator sequel, total garbage. But like schlocky fun in, I guess, kind of a fun little way. Save the best for last. There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, There Will Be Blood. I mean, I have a couple quick mentions, but
No, you don't. No, I'm joking.
well, okay. Well, let me go to those, and then we'll talk about.
I'm messing with you. Go ahead. You
So
do it.
let me. I want to shout out
Sure.
the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert
I
Ford.
knew you were going to mention that one.
Yeah, Robert Deakins shot that movie. It's. I don't want to use the word gorgeous because a lot of people might look at
Roger
it.
Deakins.
Roger Deakins, whatever. What did I say?
Robert.
No, I don't know. Anyways,
It's on tape. You'll get it.
okay, it's not tape.
Okay, whatever. We got it on record.
Digital.
We're recording with a cassette.
Yeah, no, I thought I said Roger Deakins, but anyways, I think the movie looks great. It's kind of a little overlong, but I think it's very good, and that's Casey Affleck is in that one as well.
Yeah, the title's over long.
It's great, but you know, Brad Pitt
that's a good
plays the
shout
main
out.
character. Yeah, I
Really
think
good shout
I think
out.
it's a good one. Another two more for me.
Sure.
And this is a weird one because I was totally surprised on how much I actually liked it at the time because I'm not at all really into them anymore.
Okay.
The musical Sweeney Todd.
Okay. Yeah.
Demon Barber of Fleet
Yeah,
Street.
that was one of the little too weird for me. Like Tim Burton after like the '90s, I'm just not really very much into most Tim Burton stuff. But
And it's weird because I don't really enjoy watching it that much today, but at the time, I really, really dug it.
there was a phase where it seemed like every emo kid and girl was kind of really into Tim Burton and all of his weird pale characters, and they were also into Johnny Depp, and like you put Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter in a Tim Burton movie, it was just like all of the people that liked it, I was like, this makes me not like this movie.
And
you know,
then
nothing against the movie.
They go buy all the Nightmare Before Christmas merch at Spencer's, the Spencer Gifts, and
exactly.
Yeah.
So no hate against that movie, but just not my kind of thing. I'm not a musical guy.
and then last one, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Pan's Labyrinth was also that year.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Pan's
Guillermo del
Labyrinth,
Toro's
very good movie.
his foreign language film. It's in Spanish, and I think he's on record by saying like that movie almost killed him, literally by from just being worked so hard. And I don't know if it was like a weight gain thing. I don't know, but that movie. I don't
Excellent.
think it won, but it should have won Best Foreign Language Film.
Yeah, it was it's excellent. It's got a great legacy. It's in the Criterion Collection, which is a nice little, like, that's an honor in and of itself. So definitely check out Pan's Labyrinth. Great sort of fantasy, but also interpretable as not a fantasy at all.
Yeah.
So it kind of works really well if you're a genre fan or a non-genre fan. But back to There Will Be Blood. Daniel Day-Lewis just given the performance of a lifetime.
I would, like, if you had to tell me, hold a gun to my head, pick the best performance of any actor ever in history, I would be like, Daniel Day-Lewis, There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, there's not a lot of movies where you just kind of sit and be like, this is some damn good acting. But you watch There Will Be Blood, it's like, what a performance, Like, even a normie can say, this is some great acting.
Yeah, it's every single scene he's in is just stellar.
And he has scenes where he's playing it really subtle as well as going big. Like, Daniel Day-Lewis, like, I mean, I'm sure it's the most vanilla thing to say that Daniel Day-Lewis is an amazing actor, but that guy kills it in There Will Be Blood.
He's got 3 Oscars for a reason.
I think that's a record, too, so he deserved it. All right, so now we're on to 2008, unless you have any more.
Nope.
All right, first big one, got to mention it, Cloverfield.
Big fan.
Great found footage giant monster movie. Such an interesting concept to tackle with a found footage movie.
Yeah.
Just the teaser debuted in front of Transformers without a title card, so everyone was just perpetually referring to it as 1/18/08, which was the release date. Then they finally dropped the title as Cloverfield, and it's just like really awesome, fun, fast paced. It's like sub 80 minutes.
And I think I really miss the times when J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot, his company, and that whole crew really had that secretive marketing that I kind of think died off later on with Super 8. They kind of stopped doing that.
The viral marketing was huge
viral
for a
marketing
bit,
campaigns.
and then it kind of felt like people got sick of it. You know, the mystery box stuff.
Right,
Rambo, Sly Stallone bringing another franchise back with Rambo. Super violent, super action-packed, total guy's guy kind of a movie. Nothing much to say about that. In Bruges, a little under-celebrated and
I can't believe you said that. That's on my list.
And under-recommended. I accidentally misspelled it here as In Bruges, but it's In Bruges. And it's just this quirky kind of dark comedy, and Colin Farrell gives one of my favorite lines in that movie where he's like, if I grew up on a farm and was retarded, Bruges might impress me, but I didn't, so it doesn't. And I just love that.
Yeah, it's Martin McDonough, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, is before that he was a playwright. He did some stuff, and he knows how to nail that black comedy dialogue.
And he's got another one a few years after this that we'll bring up one day.
So good.
And I've always liked Brendan Gleeson, and he's great in that movie.
He's great. And most recently, for anybody who's kind of like paying attention to movies, Martin McDonough, he did 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and then most recently he did the Banshees of Inisherin. So he has a long time working relationship with Colin Farrell, and they are and Brendan Gleeson.
And good for Colin Farrell, because he's not in a lot of great movies, unfortunately. Like, Colin Farrell is better than a lot of his filmography would imply.
Yeah, and he gets to be his Irish self. Like, he is fantastic.
I think he's a case of someone that, like a Keira Knightley a little bit, when you take the natural accent away from them, they lose a little bit of their charisma. You know, that's my opinion. But you know,
because he had zero charisma in SWAT.
yeah. Just roast him. You were saving that one for a while here. Speaking of Colin Farrell not having zero charisma. All right. The would-be 300 of 2008, 10,000 BC, was not the 300 of 2008.
Who's the director on that
It just
one?
tried to beat Roland
Emmerich? Yeah, he declined a little bit.
I remember they hyped up the CGI on that movie before it came out like it was groundbreaking. Then you watch it, it's like, this is pretty standard issue.
Some of the wides are good with the mammoths and
the mammoth stuff is solid, but like the saber-tooth tigers and all that,
it does not hold up.
And it's like a bland movie. I remember the music felt like it was non-existent in that movie. But
well, and that, to me, I don't like really bringing this up, but it feels a little whitewashed. Like, some of these characters, they don't seem genuine. Like, I don't know. It just seems weird.
And how much of that was kind of Hollywood versus what he would have preferred? I'm sure he would blame the studios.
And I don't even want to say whitewash.
It is a very white 10,000 BC. I don't know if that's accurate.
Yeah, they're not really Caucasian, but they're just like, I'm like,
yeah. I mean, Cliff Curtis in that movie, he's not a white guy. I mean, but yeah, it feels kind of like they're, regardless of ethnicity, they all feel a little too pretty.
Yeah, it doesn't feel authentic.
Yeah, it feels a little Hollywood. Iron Man, the launch of the MCU, the launch of the summer movie season. What more is there to say about it?
It's a great movie. To this day, it's a great movie. It's there's a lot of freaking movies in the MCU now, but I gotta
Mm-hmm.
say, if I had to like pick a top 5 to 7 or whatever, like it's definitely up there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to say. RDJ kills it. Jon Favreau, great directing. Great cast. Jeff Bridges, Gwyneth Paltrow, just excellent all around. Like a great example of a superhero movie.
A tonally consistent.
Yes, exactly. Speed Racer, a little overlooked, a little underrated.
Huge budget for that movie.
Yeah.
That's what hurt it.
Yeah.
But
And I think people were just not on board with kind of the live action cartoon style they wanted to emulate with it. The sort of like live action animation feature they were kind of going for. So it just ended up making people think it looked weird and odd and stupid. And so it just didn't get the traction. Opening a week after Iron Man probably didn't help it either.
well, and you got to give it to the Wachowski siblings that
At the time, they were the Wachowski brothers.
yeah, they have since transitioned, but you got to give it to them for always trying to push the envelope with certain genres.
100%. They go for it whether they land it or not.
And I really like that movie has Matthew Fox, from Lost,
Yeah.
and he didn't really get a whole lot of work after that, after Lost.
I think he's
Or
a
during
guy.
Lost.
There's a whole career that he never had that he deserved.
Yeah, real quick, what was that movie that he's in? And I think Dennis Quaid is in it, and it's told from multiple perspectives.
Vantage Point.
Vantage
that's
Point.
actually another. That's actually it was a. I think it's a 2007 or 2008 movie. So it would be in the lineup here. We're talking at an appropriate time. Yeah, legit movie. Really,
Yeah,
really
it's not,
solid.
it's not bad at all. It's not great either, but again, Matthew Fox is in that,
and it's a unique concept. And I always like Dennis Quaid. You know. So. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Look, people hated on it at the time. Compared to Dial of Destiny, this thing's a masterpiece.
yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan. Sure, it's not perfect, and maybe George Lucas had a kind of an influence there where, Spielberg let it get the best of him. But if you look at that,
And I can understand they put that the criticism, it's pushing a little too sci-fi when Indiana Jones is typically more like religious artifacts and things like that. But
Still.
I mean, I think it works. Here's the thing: hot take. I prefer it to Temple of Doom. I really never cared for Temple of Doom very much. I love Short Round, but I don't love Temple of Doom.
I think thematically, and on the whole, it plays as a better sequel to
Last Crusade.
The Last Crusade.
Yeah.
Or as, if you want to look at it as like a trilogy, take away Temple of Doom.
Raiders, Last
Raiders,
Crusade, and
it kind of
and
plays
Crystal
as
Skull.
a better through line.
Because then they're all
trilogy.
kind of separated out by these amount of years,
Look, it might be sacrilege to say that, this one's better than Temple of
I
Doom.
think it is.
It's just not, Temple of Doom is just not my favorite movie, and I think it's a lot of people's least favorite Indiana Jones. Not to say it's a bad movie.
Recently, though, you see the people that are like Temple of Doom secretly the best. Like, no,
I don't think so.
You're just doing that. It's not actually. Sorry, hate to tell you.
Yeah, I
The
don't
Incredible Hulk, the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk, a better action movie than the first Hulk. Not better CGI. There's something weird with the Hulk model in there. It's like the CGI is all at once feels worse and better than the 2003 movie. It feels kind of weird.
So to me, the sequence where he changes at the school,
That's good.
it's good, but
The transformation's good.
It's got but then when he's actually like running around and like fighting Blonsky's
In the
character,
broad daylight,
it's very, very
Rough.
inconsistent and rough. It's very bad, and I think
Yeah.
even the other Hulk has better visuals.
And the main VFX company on that film was Rhythm and Hughes, who was known for doing things more like Stuart Little and the Beavers and Chronicles of Narnia, more kind of animated character type CGI characters as opposed to like a live action creature. And I think when you look at it, it feels a little bit like it's animated in a way. It feels more like an animated character as opposed to a CGI in a live action character. It's hard to explain the difference, but you notice it in the movement and the motion.
Yeah, it's not a bad movie. It's got a cool climax. The CGI is very inconsistent, and I think it suffers from having a not great director, Louis Leterrier or whatever.
Yeah, Louis Leterrier.
Yeah,
Leterrier.
Yeah, he directed Transporter before that. And,
Unleashed.
and
Transporter
Unleashed
2.
yeah. It just, I don't think he was the right pick. It's a
It
very
was
messy movie.
in over his head for a heavy CGI movie. From what I understand, he wanted to do more practical effects. It's sad. We almost had Guillermo. If not for Hellboy 2, we would have had Guillermo del Toro making the Incredible
Imagine the
Hulk.
direction the MCU would have went there.
Yeah, if you'd started with Jon Favreau's Iron Man and Guillermo del Toro's Incredible Hulk, would have been fantastic. WALL-E, a really good Pixar. Kind of my
Criterion
last.
Collection now.
Yeah, kind of my last favorite kind of Pixar's making peak cinema. Like it's almost an art house kind of a movie.
It
from
feels like a
Pixar.
film.
Yeah, and I really dug that. I really like WALL-E.
And it's got a very scary prediction of what our future could
Probably
be
more
like.
accurate than
Yeah.
we want to admit. Yeah. Wanted, Curving the Bullet with Angelina Jolie and Morgan Freeman and James McAvoy. Really very 2000s action slick movie, but a cool action movie worth checking out. Hancock with Will Smith, doing a superhero movie. That's solid. Not amazing.
That one was his last big box office
after
one.
that, it just never really hit
Yeah,
the same
he hit
way.
7 pounds after that.
Yep.
Which was the same year, I believe.
Yeah, or December of 07 or maybe December of 08, something like that.
I think it's 08.
But yeah, yes, it was. Hellboy 2, Guillermo del Toro, really solid. Like, in my opinion, a huge leap over the first one.
It's fantastic. It is so good.
Even like the opening prologue sequence, instead of doing a typical sort of fantasy movie prologue, they do it with these like string puppets to kind of make it stylistically unique. Just like a lot of interesting creative and visual flares in that movie that I really like.
Like he leans into it, and it's almost like his Star Wars. Like when they're underground
Yeah.
in the fairy market, is it called?
Or his Lord of the Rings kind of thing.
Like
His
there's so
visual
mu-
aesthetic.
Yeah, it's his use of color, his production design is always on point.
He production designs the hell out of his movies. It's excellent. Danny Elfman does a great score for that movie. I have to shout it out. All right, here we go. The Barbenheimer of 2008. Same weekend, The Dark Knight and Mamma Mia opening, and they both absolutely kill it at the box office. And it's another Warner Brothers Universal combo. It's just inverted. The Nolan movie was from Warner Brothers this time, and the other movie was from Universal.
Yeah, definitely had. That was the first like Barbenheimer thing going on.
Yeah,
I remember that very vividly.
Yeah, it wasn't a meme. I remember it was the big competition though, and I love just being like The Dark Knight totally crushed Mamma Mia. I just love bragging rights about it as a 16-year-old. Love The Dark Knight, masterpiece.
Yeah, we'll dive into it more, but there's not a whole lot to be said that hasn't been said already.
Yeah, Heath Ledger killed it. Christopher Nolan killed it. Excellent movie. Step Brothers, kind of one of the last big Will Ferrell comedies for me. You know, just such a dirty, filthy comedy movie, but fun. Mummy 3, probably the worst.
Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
Yep, with Jet Li and recasting Rachel Weisz and it just Brendan Fraser.
They squeezing too much out of it. They're
Yeah.
milking the franchise. I think that was happening a lot around that time.
They were just reaching for stuff.
And then not many years later, we get like MIB3 and all these kind of people. They're trying to really
Yeah.
milk their franchises.
Yep, Tropic Thunder, an iconic comedy.
Could not be made today.
No, you couldn't even suggest it. They would
No.
laugh you out of town. But
Dude.
it's an underappreciated gem. Paramount wouldn't even put it out themselves on 4K disc. They licensed it out to a third party to put it out on 4K disc. Like, what kind of heat do you think the movie's going to bring down?
So I might be jumping the gun a little bit, but to kind of do that, because I think that movie is absolutely hilarious. From the get-go, the fake trailers
Are great.
And they're so
iconic.
They're so
They're
good.
iconic.
But here's the thing: Tom Cruise is in that movie as.
Oh yeah, that movie is so stacked with such a great cast. You forget that people like Matthew McConaughey and Tom Cruise are like killing it in side roles in that movie.
Right. Okay. So Tom Cruise is in that movie, and RDJ is famously in that movie for portraying a black person.
Well, portraying a white guy who's portraying a black person.
Right.
Yes.
I know who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
That whole thing. Famous for that. But what's really cool is 2008, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I'm sorry, but 2008 is a really cool year for supporting actor nominations at the Academy. Ultimately, it went to Heath Ledger,
Deserved.
posthumously, whatever. But you had Tom Cruise was nominated
For a comedy.
for like 3 minutes of footage for a comedy, just
Yeah.
buck wild, whatever.
Yeah.
RDJ was nominated
For
for
that
the
same movie. Yeah. Where he's doing a blackface character, playing a man who's doing blackface.
Yeah, and then you also had what's his name from Pineapple Express
James Franco was
James
nominated
Franco
for Pineapple Express.
was nominated for being a stoner.
Gosh, that was a wild time.
For supporting actor, it was a crazy year.
That's fantastic. Pineapple Express is legit.
Yeah.
But which was also right around this time of the year. Pineapple Express was hilarious. Movie.
Hilarious. That's when I think Seth Rogen really just kind of...
That was a peak.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
he was like a little... I'm sure he was in a lot of stuff, but he's actually pretty visible in Anchorman. I think I forgot to mention Anchorman.
Okay.
There's a scene, I think, at the end where he falls into the bear pit.
Okay.
Seth Rogen is actually one of the camera guys of the news crew, and he's only in there for
Really?
like 2 seconds.
Wow, that's wild. A sci-fi misfire from one Vin Diesel, Babylon AD. Trying to go for the Blade Runner vibes, and it trying is the key word. It doesn't land.
He's got a streak of those.
It doesn't land it. Burn After Reading from the Coen Brothers, their follow-up to No Country for Old Men.
I saw that in theaters,
Nice.
and one of the most shocking things ever in any movie with Brad Pitt. I'm not going to spoil it.
He steals the show for sure. My older brother always teased me and joked me that the John Malkovich character is so angry and goes on rants about morons. He's like, that reminds me of you when you get angry talking about me. I'm like, okay, like, when Brad Pitt's like, his rapport with his coworkers was great. He's like, the word is rapport, you effing moron.
It's rapport.
My older brother's like, that's how you talk to people. I'm like, sorry. Eagle Eye with Shia LaBeouf, kind of
off Transformers.
Yeah, not a great movie, but like I saw it in theaters. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, it was his return collaboration with DJ Caruso, who did
from Disturbia,
which I think I didn't mention.
That was 2007.
Yeah.
Disturbia. Yeah, that was fun. I'm more of a Disturbia guy, I guess, than Eagle Eye, but each Lakeview Terrace with Sam Jackson. Kind of a domestic thriller kind of a movie, nothing special. Max Payne with Mark Wahlberg, an odd video game adaptation. I remember walking out of that movie and my buddy's older brother was like, I don't know if that was the worst movie ever, but it was one of the worst movies ever. I'm like, I don't know if it was that bad. It's not great. It's not good by any chance.
There's like one shot in slow-mo where he sees all the angels or demons flying. Then I'm like, this is like 300-esque.
The trailer music was cool, and I remember it was just odd to me that they showed all these hallucinations as like they marketed the movie like it was like this weird fantasy. It's like, it's not that. It's a noir shooter movie. All that stuff wasn't real. All the CGI money spent on that stuff, and it's all hallucinations from the characters.
Yeah. Not a good adaptation.
No. Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah, best picture of that year.
Yeah, I'm not a Slumdog Millionaire kind of guy.
I was a big fan of that. Especially you had The Planes by MIA was a big song at that time, and
that was in Pineapple Express as well. Yeah, so I in my teenage years I really raged against.
Was that in Pineapple Express?
Yeah, in all the trailers. For
the trailers
Pineapple
it was
Express, and I remember I just I always rage against a little bit of the like movies that feel like Oscar movies that then win a bunch of Oscars. I'm always just like, these movies can go to hell. I don't like that Oscar bait stuff. I don't know. I just, something about me, I won't like them.
I just remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Like the way,
Yeah. Quantum of Solace, the sequel to Casino Royale, not as good, but
a victim of the writer's strike.
Definitely the 2007 writer's strike took its toll. But you know what? It's very fast paced. It's very short. It's like 100 minutes. It has its moments. It's a little too Bourne-esque, but it's a solid sequel.
Am I jumping ahead? One was Revenge of the Fallen.
That was 2009.
Okay, well, we'll wait.
Yep, no problem. Twilight, A Scourge Upon the Earth.
You know what though? Kudos to both Kristen Stewart and
Robert
Pattinson for overcoming that franchise.
They've shaken it. Pattinson's done better than Stewart as far as shaking the shackles of Twilight, but you know what? More power to him.
They're both good now. Pattinson's great now.
Yeah, I managed to not see any of those movies in my life.
He nailed Batman. Unfortunately, Chris, I'm so sorry. I did, I think, have to go see one of those in the theaters with one of my friends at the time.
Yeah, that was a big thing.
Not going to get into
a lot of boyfriends being dragged to those movies, and I managed to stay pure.
Look, I don't say movies are terrible very often, but those are terrible movies.
Yeah, they're bad. They're weird. Punisher Warzone, depending on who you ask, either the inferior or superior sequel to the Thomas Jane Punisher.
It might be more comic accurate, but I think it's inferior.
I think a lot of people just like the extra violence about it, like the excessive over-the-top nature.
And
but
R.I.P. to
Ray Stevenson.
Yeah,
I hear he was really solid. Really solid as Nick Castle.
Yeah.
The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves.
Mm-hmm.
I love the original Day the Earth Stood Still. Kind of left a mark on me when I was young. It's kind of a not great CGI, frilly blockbuster movie, but I remember watching the trailer and my mom leaned over to me. She's like, Keanu Reeves was such a great pick to play an alien trying to be human.
Yeah, honestly.
It is inspired casting.
Yeah, go back and watch that trailer. It's actually an amazing trailer.
It's a very solid. It was trying to be, in the same way 10,000 BC was trying to be the 300 of that year. This was trying to sort of hit the I Am Legend vibes of that year, that sort of big sort of thriller sci-fi blockbuster.
And it had Will Smith's son, Jaden.
Yeah. It tried. It didn't quite hit it, but it tried, and it's not bad. It's not terrible.
I think it's worth a watch.
Yeah. Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
I think he gives a great performance.
Yeah, I remember that one being really critically not received well rather at the time, but then with fans it was
cool. That was a heavily rewatched DVD in our household. The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, everybody was talking about Mickey Rourke's comeback that year, and
It kind of started. Sin City kind of started it a few years earlier, and then everyone. I remember after The Wrestler, everyone just kept saying like he spoiled his comeback, he's ruined his comeback. Like he didn't really take advantage of it in the way that you think you.
yeah, no, but he did The Wrestler and was nominated for that one. I think he was like everybody's favorite pick to win because I remember I was big into watching him at that time, and he lost to what's his name? Who's in Milk?
Oh really? Oh
yeah,
gosh.
who played Harvey Milk?
Sean
Penn.
Sean Penn. Yeah.
Yeah.
God, that's unfortunate. See, hindsight, I'm like I'd go not with Sean Penn for that. You know.
Yeah, Mickey Rourke gives a great performance in that as a wrestler, and I think, you know, it kind of reminds me a lot of the new movie that's coming out, or that is out rather, the Iron Claw.
Iron Claw, yeah,
it's similar
so,
vibes.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a little bit of like a downer kind of a movie. Like
Marissa Tomei gives a great performance in that movie.
Okay, but yeah, Wrestler's a good movie. 7 Pounds from Will Smith.
That's the one that broke his
kind of a
record.
misfire, and we've mentioned it like 80 times already before we finally got to 7 Pounds.
Well, I don't know what hurt his career more, this or the slap, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Yes Man from Jim Carrey. Kind of like, at the time, it felt like kind of a return to him doing more comedies after branching out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes Man's legit, you know. Not my favorite movie, not my favorite Jim Carrey, but a solid movie. Mm-hmm. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. That one's unique for me because I got a hold of the script in the online forums and read the whole script before I ever saw the movie. So the movie that I had pictured in my head was this masterpiece. I was like, this thing's going to be huge. I'm like, the writer of Forrest Gump. I'm like, I saw it in my brain. It's perfect. And then you see the movie and I'm like, is this what it feels like? I'm like, because this movie's not as good as what I had pictured in my head. I'm like, every awesome moment that I remember noticing, I'm like, man, none of it's as great as what I kind of saw when I was reading the script. But still solid movie.
It's a great movie, and it won the VFX Oscar that year for some excellent VFX work. More on the subtle side, not like Transformers.
Aging Brad Pitt up and down, and aging Cate Blanchett up and down. And you know, maybe people are like, oh, maybe David Fincher wasn't the best pick. He's a little bit of a darker filmmaker. Maybe a Spielberg or a Ron Howard or a Zemeckis would have gone to town with this movie and made something really great. But I still think it's solid for sure.
Yeah.
Marley and Me, a sad dog movie. Not my kind of movie.
No, but that's a movie that I think that's better than it has any right to be. Is like you look at the cover and you're like, oh, Owen Wilson and Jennifer Aniston and a dog. It's a comedy, but it's actually quite the drama, dramedy with the family dynamic. And
I knew what that movie was going to be all about, so I avoided that movie like the plague.
Yeah.
Like I'm a sucker for animals in movies. Like my mom, I just remember my mom saw it and she was telling me, she's like, gosh, she's like, it was so annoying. There was this lady like 2 seats over me just bawling her eyes out in that movie. She's like, I was so annoyed. I wanted to walk out. Like, you know, so that is what that is. The failed follow-up to Sin City from Frank Miller, The Spirit, going for that same visual aesthetic. A great cast in that movie. Got a lot of great ladies, and Sam Jackson's in it. Like a great aesthetic, but not a great movie.
Didn't work.
Not a great movie. Nope. Revolutionary Road, the reunion between DiCaprio and Kate Winslet.
Yeah. Sam Mendes.
Very well acted movie, very dramatic movie. Not necessarily the movie I want to throw on all the time or would watch multiple times, but solid filmmaking. One of my kind of unsung minor classics from 2008, Tom Cruise and Valkyrie. I really like Valkyrie a lot.
Bryan Singer, right?
Yeah, Bryan Singer.
Yeah.
Christopher McQuarrie was producing it and co-wrote it, kind of an early foray from him before he kind of really got back into doing the directing thing. But, you know, it's the story of the Nazis in World War II who were trying to assassinate Hitler and bring Hitler down because they didn't really agree with him in this way, that way, or the other. And Tom Cruise is the lead, and it's a great ensemble of the kind of actors and faces that you see in all of those kind of period piece movies, playing a lot of Brits and Germans and things. And it's really tense movie. It's got this great sort of tension and suspense about it.
It's got a thriller element to it in that regard.
It's an interesting and well executed kind of period drama thriller.
And what's crazy is you think about the fact that they had Tom Cruise missing a hand, and he had the fake eye, and the
eye patch.
Yeah, eye patch. Well, he had the glass eye in there. They do a really good effect of it not moving around. And then in the beginning of that movie, they're actually speaking German, and they do the cool little transition to where they start speaking English, so we don't have to read subtitles.
Yeah, so they show it's a stylistic thing that they're transitioning to English. You're hearing English, but it's implied that they're still speaking German.
Yeah, same thing they did with Avatar: The Way of Water.
Yeah, and Mission Impossible 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. All right, unless you've got any stragglers from 2008.
You covered the last one I was going to talk about, Valkyrie.
Awesome. Yeah, I tried to save it for last, so there we go. All right, moving to 2009. The first big one for me, the sort of January '09 hit for me, is Taken with Liam Neeson.
Taken.
Love that movie. Sort of started off Liam Neeson's like 60-year-old action star phase. I don't know if they're ever as good as the first Taken, but I remember it was awesome. It seemed like every movie I ever saw in him as a kid, he died in it. And so it was nice to see like a big, awesome action movie where Liam Neeson was the hero and he didn't die at the end. So I love that. Couple of trashy horror movies. Unborn, My Bloody Valentine 3D. Kind of trash, kind of schlock, but a horrible theater experience. It's just kind of, they're nothing worth talking about. The Uninvited is a nice little horror movie with a fun twist at the end. So if you ever want to check out a good horror movie from 2009, check out The Uninvited. You ever see Coraline? Was that ever your deal?
I wasn't into it.
Me
That
neither.
whole style was just not my thing.
I like stop motion, but Coraline.
I was
not
more
my
of a
thing.
flushed away kind of guy.
Oh God, for stop. Oh jeez. Okay, you're awful. You're awful.
No, like Chicken Run and Wallace and Gromit.
Oh gosh. See, okay, I would definitely prefer like Coraline or Kubo and the Two Strings to something like that.
Okay, well, Kubo and the Two Strings is definitely
We'll get to
amazing.
the Kubo and the Two Strings. All right, Push, another kind of movie where right walking out of it, everyone's like, that was really bad.
Yeah.
Has a good cast, Dakota Fanning, Chris Evans, fun concepts, but like, oof, not a very well done movie. Just feels cheap. The Friday the 13th remake, kind of, see, that's a good slasher remake. Much better than My Bloody Valentine, in my opinion. Again, not a horror guy very much anymore, but if you are, like, Friday the 13th 09, solid slasher remake. Getting through here. First kind of big, great one of 2009, I think, Watchmen. Watchmen's solid. Watchmen is solid.
Well, it's certainly one of the best trailers of all time.
Oh, yeah.
The
Fantastic.
previous year. Yeah, so Watchmen for me, I saw that with my dad. I think we mentioned it before. And when we do a Zack Snyder filmography, we'll get even more into it. I love Watchmen.
I don't love it like that, but I do like it a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my favorite Zack Snyder movie, but I just like how grand it is. Like, it's just a lot. You know,
Big movie.
It's a big movie. Visually, I think it's incredible.
And a lot of great things, because I've read the graphic novel before the movie came out.
Yeah.
So I kind of had that, like, here's the movie in my head as I would see it perfectly. So it was never going to match that. But the thing that the graphic novel did really well is it would break into these montage sequences and these flashback sequences. And I was really nervous about if they were going to capture those, because they're almost like these vignettes within the story. And Snyder captures them excellently. And, like, the aesthetic. He's just great at aesthetics, and he captures it really well for the whole graphic novel.
Yeah, the whole sequence with Dr. Manhattan and how he goes through time, how he perceives it.
That in and of itself is almost like a Best Picture winning short film. It's just excellently done.
Ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time.
Yeah. Last House on the Left, a really hard to watch horror remake. It's another like grungy, violent sort of movie.
Was
but
Jennifer Lawrence in that one?
It'll leave a mark. No, you're thinking of House at the End of the Street.
Oh, okay.
That's a trash movie. I wouldn't recommend it. That's from like several years later.
Oh,
That's like
okay.
one of those like filmed before she was a hit star, and then her hit movie came out, and then they're like, all right, put this out. Oh no, it's a horrible movie. Last House on the Left is just a dark movie.
There's a lot of house movies.
Yeah. Fast and Furious, the fourth one, kind of brought back all the original stars, kind of got that franchise its second life,
It's not my favorite. I don't think it's that great.
No. 5 and 6, I think, are kind of 5, 6, 7 are kind of the ones that, if you're into those movies, 5, 6, and 7 are kind of the ones you like.
I think it peaked at 5 and 6.
Yeah. I like 7 though, Final Farewell for Paul Walker, but we'll get there. All right, dishonorable mention, Dragon Ball Evolution. Just a smear on the legacy.
One of the worst movies ever made.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's overtly awful. I remember trying to be a hopeful teenager. I'm like, the director of Final Destination 1 and 3. I'm like, the director of The One. I'm like, okay, maybe he can make a decent Dragon Ball movie. And then it is trash.
It's
Sorry.
so bad.
Nothing against the cast. I'm sure they were all doing their thing or whatever, but like, oh gosh, it's a bad movie.
What were they thinking?
Yeah. Well, it was to retain the rights. Fox had paid for the rights in like the early 2000s, and it was about to lapse unless they put a movie into production. So then they made it. That's
Makes
exactly
sense.
what it was. Fighting with Channing Tatum, Terrence Howard. I'm only mentioning that because I remember all the trailers and promos had Terrence Howard being like, "We'll make some money," and me and my older brother would say that to each other all the time.
Yeah.
So it's just this meme of a movie. It's not a good movie. I don't like the movie, but like, we'll make some money just always comes to mind for me.
Shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Man, what a banger for terrible movies.
Yeah,
banger of the year for terrible movies.
I know. It's all right, I guess, but
No,
like
it's not.
the silver lining is that it got Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. It got his foot in the door for that, so like led to greater things with Deadpool. But yeah, just not a great movie. Not a great movie overall. I like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. He's always solid, but that movie around him is not great.
God, terrible CG, like
Awful CGI.
destroying the helicopter,
Awful.
walking away from the explosion, the
Awful.
CGI claws.
Awful blue screen. Oh, the CGI claws in the bathroom when he's testing them out is terrible. Okay. You know, if they were trying to make a prequel to the first X-Men, I guess they were doing it well because the CGI is worse than 2000 X-Men,
It
but
is so
whatever.
bad.
All right, Star Trek 09. That was a legit.
Excellent movie.
Yeah, I know hardcore Star Trek fans don't love it because it's a different kind of tone and style, but it's a prequel, sequel, reboot all in one. It's this adventurous, kinetic sci-fi kind of movie. Michael Giacchino kills the score. It's a good ensemble cast. I have a soft spot for ensemble movies, sci-fi adventure, a lot of great,
Yeah.
just a lot of great sci-fi cool moments in that movie, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, it did a smart thing by being a reboot, but also kind of a legacy sequel.
Yeah.
Kind of like with
Yeah,
the character.
They managed to incorporate Leonard Nimoy in there in a really interesting way. I thought it was like a perfect solution. Like, you don't want to reboot a franchise that has this long legacy and this big fan base, but you kind of want a fresh start for new fans. And I thought that was an eloquent solution.
the way they kind of alienate, Spock and Kirk, and how they show them that their destiny is to become best friends,
Yeah.
kind of thing. My dad was a huge Star Trek fan, and we watched all the shows growing up, for me growing up. So I was a big fan at the time too. And really, I think his only actual criticism is when he fudges the test, and he's all kind of nonchalant eating the apple while what is the name of that
The
test?
Kobayashi Maru.
Kobayashi Maru, thank you.
Yep.
He was like, why is it like that? But I get it. That's
They
his
play it off
character.
very goofy, yeah.
Yeah, that was his only complaint. And for my dad, a huge diehard Star Trek fan, to say that.
Because I think it's in the hard canon that he always cheated on it.
did.
But I think the way they play it off is like, well, that seems overt, like terribly obvious.
Yeah, it
you
is.
know?
It is.
And it's blatant. It's like, I think it's implied that it was something else was going on. Terminator Salvation, I described Terminator 3 as an overall good movie with a lot of bad moments. Terminator Salvation is like an overall bad movie with a lot of good moments, I think.
The director's cut is far superior.
Yeah, sure.
Just barely.
And like Christian Bale's kind of overcooking it. Like it's like Sam Worthington like upstages Christian Bale in that movie a little bit, and that's interesting. They tried. There's some interesting moments. It's just not what we wanted.
And it gave us the very famous audio from the production of Christian Bale yelling.
Yeah, that's
You amateur.
Yeah.
Or
Am I
whatever.
gonna rip your lights down? What are you doing in my scene? Just yelling at the director. He's like, "You gonna say something to this guy?" The director's like, "I didn't see it happen." Like it's like, oh man, like
There's an amazing cartoon of him as Batman with Robin,
Yeah.
and they're like,
oh, there's a million and a
It's
half
so
memes of
good.
the Christian Bale. Someone turned it into
They're
a
so
song. Like it's insane.
yeah.
Drag Me to Hell, a really good return to horror for Sam Raimi.
Raimi.
Really underrated. Not a lot to say about it, but like it's like a spiritual Evil Dead 4 in my opinion. Really solid. Up from Pixar makes everyone cry. Not much to say about that movie.
Yeah, it really proves that the visual storytelling without any dialogue can just really be super effective. And
Yeah, I'd love to see like a 75, 80-minute movie tried to be executed with like little to no dialogue. It'd be interesting.
That one recently did that one Alien movie on Hulu. I forgot.
Oh yeah, I haven't watched that yet.
it's-
The you're being left behind, or
Something
no
like
one,
that.
no one will save you, or something like that. Yeah,
no one will. Yeah, I don't know. It's
no one will watch this movie.
It's okay.
Yeah,
But
I like how you mentioned it. You're like, yeah, it wasn't that good.
well, it's cool that they're trying to.
Yeah,
go for
yeah,
it,
yeah.
but
He's trying. That's fine.
he's a trier.
Oh, he's trying.
He's a
trying. Okay. Hangover, great comedy.
One of the
iconic.
best.
Sequels aren't good, but The Hangover is a memorable comedy.
Yeah, and again, I don't think you can make a whole lot of that today
No,
either.
that's part of why these it's like, we gloss over the comedies and don't linger on them very much, but some of them like are absolute gems because you will not get this offensive humor in modern day comedies. They're like an extinct breed. So it's like, check out these comedies because like there's jokes in there that like you just aren't allowed to make anymore, so they're valuable for that alone. Transformers 2,
Victim of the Writer's Strike as
Victim
well.
of the Writer's Strike, inferior sequel to Transformers 07. Cool effects, cool action, all the usual stuff, but just not.
It's not there.
Big step down. Yep. The Hurt Locker. I'm not the biggest fan of this movie.
No, and from what I hear is from a lot of people who are actually in the service, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments or anything, but it's not even like accurate as far as, military,
Oh, really?
like how they do things. And like the scene where they're taking out the sniper, and I think Anthony Mackie is actually on the sniper. It's not like even remotely accurate. And the bomb diffusing, the IED stuff might actually be legit, but from what I understand, a lot of it's not even that.
I got you. Good for I like that Jeremy Renner was like the lead and that it was a good movie for him. But
It's got a great last scene.
Yeah,
The last scene's cool.
Yeah, exactly. But not my kind of just not my vibe of movie. I'm not hating on
And
it.
it didn't make like anything at the box office. And this was
Yeah.
back when they the winners were like not making anything.
Yeah. Public Enemies, I don't like the digital cinematography of the film.
Yeah, it
but
detracts.
It was another movie where I read the script before seeing the movie, and then like the movie just wasn't as cool as the script in my mind. But really solid. Stephen Lang's really cool as like a minor role.
Michael Mann.
Yeah, Michael. Yeah, and really
directed
solid.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Christian Bale, Johnny Depp, like pretty legit movie.
If it was on film, it would have been awesome.
Yeah, a period piece like that, like really could have used that 35mm look. You know, I don't like to be a snob about things like that, but it looks very video-y.
It was new digital, just not.
Yeah. Harry Potter 6, again, not my franchising thing, but you know, Harry Potter
Did
6.
David Yates come in along at that time?
David Yates did like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, he did the whole last string. Shout out to another kind of horror movie gem, The Collector. Not a lot of people have seen that. Me and my older brother kind of saw it in theaters on a whim. It's like, it's Saw-ish, but not Saw, but like kind of in a house being done by a guy instead of like a slasher. It's like he's like booby-trapped the house. You know, a guy is going to rob a house, and the house he goes into has been invaded by a murderer who's like put booby traps all over the place. So it's like this weird double twist. There's reasons for it, but like it's a wild horror movie. It's definitely better than you would think it is. Like it's gem. G.I. Joe, not a huge fan.
Yeah.
No, yeah, kind of a pass on that one. Channing Tatum, yeah, not that good. Inglourious Basterds, very good.
My favorite Tarantino.
Yeah, my favorite Tarantino as well. I got my license, saw the Avatar Day 20-minute preview that they were doing for free, and saw Inglourious Basterds all on the same day. My like older brother like set up this like whole thing. He's like, in the morning I went and got my license. Then we went and saw the Avatar Day preview, then saw Inglourious Basterds afterwards. Just an excellent day. Love it.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah,
Amazing movie.
I think it's his best.
Yeah, it's his strongest one for me. We'll talk about it, but like I think
people
it's
can argue for the other one, sure, Pulp Fiction or
the final line.
whatever.
This might be my masterpiece. I think it's
in there for a
on
reason.
point. It's
Yeah.
on point. All right, schlocky horror movie time. The Final Destination, which is the fourth one, and Halloween 2. Kind of bad horror movie sequels. Just wanted to mention them. They're awful. 9, a weirdly dark animated movie.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of weird, but like one of those where it's like it's trying to be a little edgier than a cartoon usually is. So I give it props for that, but a misfire.
Yeah.
Paranormal Activity, a better horror movie. Kind of tense.
Sparked a franchise.
It's been done to death at this point, but at the time it was kind of innovative and cool.
Yeah.
Zombieland. Outside of Dawn of the Dead, I love Zombieland as far as zombie movies go.
One of the best cameos of all time.
With Bill Murray.
Bill Murray.
Yeah, absolutely. Just amazing. Made me fall. I mean, I was in love with Emma Stone back then, so excellent cast. Woody Harrelson kills it as Tallahassee, you know. Great character, great like fun ensemble kind of a movie. Bronson, Tom Hardy killing it in Bronson.
Yep.
You know, good movie. The Box I'm only mentioning for a joke. You remember The Box?
Barely.
Okay, well, I just remember in the trailers they always hooked it. They're like, if you push this red button, 2 things will die.
Isn't Cameron Diaz in that?
Yeah, Cameron Diaz and I think James Marsden or something like that as the husband. But it's like, if you push this button, 2 things will die. Or 2 things, sorry. If you push this button, 2 things will happen. He goes, first thing, someone somewhere in the world who you may not even know will die. And I remember a guy in the theater being like, sounds good. Like, before they even got to the second part where it's like, you'll get $1 million or whatever. Like, it was like... like that was worth it for me, but the movie's not great.
I didn't even tell you the second part.
Exactly, the movie's not great though. Christmas Carol, Zemeckis doing his CGI thing, you know.
Still on that train.
I didn't love Christmas Carol, and you know whatever. I like A Christmas Carol as a story. That movie wasn't so good. The Road,
yeah, Cormac.
tough watch.
Yeah, so they were, I think, trying to channel in that No Country for Old Men magic. Another Cormac McCarthy adaptation. Cormac McCarthy is probably my favorite author. Just a little bit of insight. I don't read a whole lot, but you know, I'm a visual.
Sorry, just I don't read.
I said a whole lot.
No, I don't. I'm teasing. Just the way you said it was fun.
But you know, Cormac.
But
McCarthy,
when I read, they're
well,
Cormac McCarthy movies.
Yeah, seriously. But you know, he's rest in peace. He passed away not too long ago, but you know, he wrote No Country for Old Men, The Road, All the Pretty Horses. Amazing classic American author. His books are almost like poetic in a way, or poetry, I should say, in that not a lot of punctuation, especially in The Road.
Yeah, and one of those like The Road is one of those films that's like, it's a very harsh watch, but it's just well handled and well made. You know, it's a hard road, quote, you know, whatever, to travel down, but you need some movies like that every now and again. That sort of brutal, bleak kind of film.
A good review I saw on that one, I forgot who did it, is it gets the adaptation perfect to the T, but it doesn't get the tone. Like, it kind of, you know, all the dialogue and the setting, like it's a great adaptation, but it doesn't quite nail like the tone.
Like the emotion, you would say, the emotional punch or the style.
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, it wasn't. They didn't have a very big budget.
They
at all.
underplay it a little bit in the movie.
Yeah.
Like it's understated, minimalist.
And, Viggo Mortensen, he gives a great performance. He lost some weight for that movie. Was it Cody? Who was the his? Was it McPhee? What's his name?
It might have been Cody Smith McPhee or whatever.
I think he plays
okay.
it.
Okay.
There's some really good scenes. It's a good movie, but it's just you definitely don't want to put it on multiple times.
It's not a happy
You
movie.
watch it once and you're like, all right, I'm good.
2012, the funniest comedy of all time. I'm like, how did they make that movie in 2009? I understand the reason that it happened is because Michael Bay was also prepping a 2012 Underworld movie, and they were trying to be faster,
Right.
so they rush it. I'm like, 3 years early? Like, for the love of God, like, this movie should at least be coming out in 2011 or something,
right.
Like,
Let us watch it before we think it's over.
Golly, 3 years before the actual year 2012. It's been actively labeled as a comedy on IMDb because we're now past 2012. Yeah, it's like a joke of a title.
Gosh, some of the VFX is kind of interesting.
It was really
good.
And I remember people were like, "Oh, it's going to win the VFX Oscar." I'm like,
Nah.
no, there's something coming out in December that's going to win it.
We'll save that one.
Yep.
I have two mentions for me, but I'll let you keep going until we get to the big one.
All right, sure. Invictus, a good Morgan Freeman performance about
rugby.
Nelson Mandela. Yeah, and Matt Damon's in it. I remember the trailer for that was one of those like magical trailers where you're like, "Oh, that's going to be such a great movie." And
it was just good.
Yeah, I like the song.
Clint Eastwood directed that. He's got quite a few of those movies that hit very good, but not all of them hit amazing.
And I think Clint Eastwood with Morgan Freeman is always excellent. $1 Million Baby, like I think they're a great combo. Lovely Bones, Peter Jackson doing a more dramatic film. Not a great movie. I don't love it, but he was trying some interesting things.
Might be revisionist history, but I think it's better than what people kind of thought it was then.
It's the type of film, like, it is what it is, but I mean, again, I think if you can just step out of the Lord of the Rings shadow and just enjoy it for what it is.
And I'm a big fan of the actress Saoirse Ronan.
Saoirse Ronan,
Yeah,
I don't know how to
It's
pronounce
Saoirse.
it.
That's how you say it. Saoirse Ronan.
Hey, I spent 10 years saying Saoirse,
Yeah,
so I don't know.
everybody does.
So there you go.
Yeah, she's a good actress.
Yes. Sherlock Holmes, like another great like Robert Downey Jr. action comedy performance. Like that's a fun reboot. Like,
Guy Ritchie.
Everyone likes the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes. I'm like, dude, my modern Sherlock Holmes is Jude Law and Robert Downey Jr. with Guy Ritchie. Like that's a winning combination for me. So I love that Sherlock Holmes. Heath Ledger's final not completed performance, Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus.
Yeah, where they changed his character's casting because
to
of
fit
that.
in Colin Farrell, Johnny Depp, and Jude Law to kind of complete the film.
Yeah.
I wish the movie was better than it was, like for his legacy. But it's nice that
He has The Dark Knight.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, exactly. The Dark Knight's his true swan song. But it's nice that they kind of completed this film and kind of had it fun. And then, do you have any that I've missed before we get to our big finale?
I have two.
Okay, go.
First one is it's kind of like a little bit more mature to be called a children's movie, but it's definitely based off the celebrated children's book, Where the Wild Things Are.
Okay, yeah, I remember loving the combination of the practical suits with the CGI faces.
James Gandolfini plays one of the things. I forgot the director.
Oh, it's Richard Linklater.
No, it's not.
No,
Linklater.
it's not. No. Oh, who is it then?
The guy who plays in. He does some cameos in Jackass.
Is it?
What's his name?
Oh, why did I think it was like a Richard Linklater thing?
Anyways, I think it's great. And you hit the nail on the head with the practical and CGI combined. Man, it's very good.
Spike Jonze.
Spike
Okay,
Jonze.
yeah, sorry, I confused
yeah.
them a lot. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
Spike Jonze.
and he does cameo in Jackass.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, that's a nice little movie.
And then another one of my favorites. I think it hasn't really aged as well as some people like, but it's still one of my favorites of all time. Is District 9.
Okay, yeah. I was always more like not as much of a District 9 guy. I like it a lot, but Blomkamp has this kind of like grungy, grimy, nasty kind of sci-fi style that like just isn't very aesthetically pleasing to me. But that's a well done movie for sure.
Yeah, and Peter Jackson gave him only $30 million.
Oh yeah,
and he was.
It looks like 100.
Yeah,
like, I will praise that. Like his filmmaking qualities are exceptional.
Yeah, he didn't get to do Halo, which maybe is for the better.
I'm glad he didn't do Halo because I don't think he would have made the Halo movie I would have liked.
More like a Gears guy.
Give him Gears of War 100%, or give him the Aliens movie he never got to make. He would absolutely kill it.
But Blomkamp's District 9 is interesting because it comes in. It's his first movie, directorial debut. It gets nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah,
which
is a sci-fi
which
movie.
Is crazy.
Sci-fi
it's hard R
debut.
My mother and I saw that at one of the local theaters. man, it was just really different. You're watching, I'm like, this is very
It
unique,
took you
very
by
special.
surprise. This
Yeah.
weird hybrid between found footage and then it kind of switches to a more traditional
Yeah, it
narrative
does.
style at the end. It manages to have some mech action in there. Like
A little bit of body horror. when
yeah.
he's-
Oh, totally body horror. And I'm not like I'm a fan in the sense of like it's a cool concept, but it's hard for me to watch body horror stuff. It really makes me queasy.
Great ending, really cool. A lot of people want a sequel. I don't think so. Leave it at as is. It's perfect the way
Yeah,
it is.
it would have been cool because he says he'd return in 7 years or
3
10
years.
years or whatever. It's like, would have been cool if they'd done that, like made the sequel that many years later. But I mean, let it stand alone, especially because Blomkamp kind of hasn't made stuff as great since.
No.
So
Elysium-
maybe don't ruin it with a bad sequel.
Yeah, Elysium was next, and with Matt Damon, it's good, it's okay. $100 million budget, looks more than that, and then he did Chappie, and then now
Yeah.
his career. Most recently, he did Gran Turismo, the video game movie. I haven't seen it yet. To be
Neither.
honest
I
with
actually heard it was pretty solid, pretty legit, like more legit than you'd think it would be. So that's
Yeah.
good. But it didn't perform. It flopped.
I think his
unfortunately.
movies that he hasn't get to make were very
Way
interesting.
More, almost like Guillermo del Toro's made some great movies, but some of his unmade stuff is like, oh my gosh, that would be a masterpiece.
His Aliens and RoboCop. would've
Yeah.
been cool.
Oh my gosh. See, Blomkamp would be great for RoboCop. Maybe not so much Halo. I'd love him on RoboCop, Gears of War, Aliens. Give him the R-rated sci-fi 80s movies, please.
Yeah.
But
So
all right.
that's it for my honorable
Yeah.
mentions. Here.
Last but not least, James Cameron's Avatar became the biggest movie of all time.
Still is.
Still is the highest grossing movie of all time. I think we're both. I mean, but
Yeah,
I'm a huge
both.
fan of that movie. I saw that movie coming years away. I was hyping it up to friends for like years. I knew it was coming, and it delivered. And I love that movie to death.
Yeah, shout out to my cousin who actually helped design the logo for the Film Jump and everything like that, and you know the title and everything. He's really good at what he does. But shout out to them because Avatar was he and his wife's first date.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, a little bit of trivia. If he's
Nice.
if he's gonna listen to this, shout out to you guys. I only remembered this because his wife just posted on Instagram, I think, a little story of their faded movie ticket. And I remember being super jealous because I was all in. I wanted to see it. He saw it first. And he was like, dude, this was incredible. You got to see it. I'm like, duh, I'm going to see it.
Yeah.
And this is, I'll let you talk about it in a second,
No,
but
do your
it's
thing.
it's one of my favorites for many reasons. And one reason is, my grandfather passed away in 2009. And my mother we took my great grandmother, my grandfather's mother, we took her to the movies, and she hadn't been to the movies in years. She was always just at her home watching TV and her mobile home there. So we take her to the movies, and I can't remember if it was in 3D or not, but regardless, she loved it. And like she's getting to see this movie
Yeah.
that's a huge leap forward
Absolutely
technically.
state of the art.
And it's like, I mean, imagine not going to the movies for many years, maybe even a decade, I don't know, or more, and then to go
Walking-
see Avatar,
Yeah.
and you're like,
that's
holy
a wild
crap.
trip.
Yeah, and it was just like, I never really got to do a whole lot with my great grandmother like that before she passed away. So really special for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, I love that movie. I could watch it today. And
Yeah, I like it for a lot of different reasons. I was looking at movies and thinking about franchise and stuff. I do this thing where I think about like a macro level, and I was like, there's a lot of stuff in the 21st century that's rooted in the 20th century. It comes from the 1900s. It's based on comics or books or old series or this or that, and it's like there's not a lot of stuff that is original to the 21st century. Like, where's the 21st century stories? And not that Avatar is necessarily like the most amazing complex narrative or whatever, but it's a genuine 21st century blockbuster that, while inspired by a lot of things from the 20th century, is not just an adaptation or a sequel or something like that. So I think it's great that it's like a 21st century story. It's like an original kind of thing. It takes you on a kind of ride similar to like when you watch The Matrix for the first time. Like, it's like this like wild kind of journey where they're just throwing these unique kind of concepts at you, and you're just going along and you're going into this world. And the visual storytelling is amazing. The visual effects are fantastic. It was the kind of experience that I remember as a teenager, that I wanted the Peter Jackson King Kong to give us, like the visual effects beyond what you could imagine them being, and that sort of jungle adventure vibe beyond what you could imagine. That's the kind of feel Avatar gave me, and I was really hyped to see it, and I felt really rewarded the insane amount of hype that I'd built up for years wasn't disappointed or let down. I remember my older brother was the one that went with me opening night, and he was like, we're like going to the tickets to go to auditorium. He's like, dude, you got to stop smiling. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I was like, I'm just really excited to see this movie. But, he teased me for that. And then I saw the movie like 4 times in theaters. I've always liked Cameron's stuff. I came up on Terminator 2 on VHS and all of that. I think he's a great filmmaker. And Avatar, it was one of those where it was like, it felt like it was being set up to be a slam dunk, and it was, I love that movie.
Yeah. Criticisms aside, sure, Fern Gully, sure, Pocahontas, but I don't care. I mean, how many...
Every generation needs those storytelling motifs.
Yeah,
though.
it's like a perfect 4-quadrant movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's got everything. I can't say enough good things about it. It still holds up. I love it to this day.
Yeah, 100. Like, there's not much to say. We'll get a Cameron episode in and we'll deep dive, but, we at the Film Jump are fans of Avatar. It gets our stamp of approval for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll always love it. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, I don't think that's... I think that's pretty much it for...
Yeah, that kind of wraps up the decade of the 2000s.
The next decade starts at 2010. I'm not sure if we're going to do a 2010 forward just yet. We might, but pretty soon we're going to do a 2023 in review as far as our favorite movies. And look, we would say our favorite movies aren't necessarily the best movies made this year.
We're specific in saying our favorite movies. This isn't our objective best, take our own opinions out of it kind of top list that's going to make everyone happy. This is the movies that we like the most.
And I'm well aware of movies like Poor Things, Anatomy of a Fall, The Maestro, all these movies getting pre-Oscar buzz.
Yeah.
Those are not my favorite movies of the year. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They're good, but I'm never going to watch them again, so to speak.
They're a watch them once kind of a thing, or appreciate the filmmaking, but it's like, do I love this movie personally? Am I going to recommend it to every friend that I suggest movies to? Like, some of those movies just don't check those boxes. I'm sorry.
Some of them do, but that's for the next one I think we'll do. And I think tomorrow, at least as of this recording, tomorrow, Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon drops. We're recording this on the 20th.
Yeah.
So pre-critical buzz right now is it's the worst of his entire career.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. That's par for the course. There's a director's cut, supposedly, and history repeats itself.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I'm very much like, I'm not one of those that's like expecting this to be some masterpiece. I haven't been on like the Rebel Moon Army or anything like that. My stance has been like, look, maybe the movie's going to be great. Maybe it's not going to be great. I was not a big fan of Army of the Dead.
Yeah.
But, I do think, though, that like, regardless of whether this movie's good or bad, I think there's like a bit of a critical bias towards Zack Snyder and his fans. When reviews are like, only the Snyder cultists will like this movie.
It's so weird.
It's like, what are you doing? Like, what perspective are you coming at as like a professional reviewer? It's like, did you have your mind made up before you saw the movie as well? Because it seems like that's what some people are doing. So it's like, okay, fine. Like, Rotten Tomatoes isn't, they've been caught paying for positive reviews and things like that. Like, it's been like, it's shady and it's whatever. It's like, there's only so much credibility. You can tell 90% of these people are gonna give a movie a bad review before their review's even out. If you can tell if it's gonna be good or bad, and doesn't feel very objective. It feels like you've got the kind of movies you like and don't like, and a lot of them
insincere,
and a lot of them are well documented that they're not gonna like Snyder movies. So fair enough.
Yeah. And Rotten Tomatoes as a review aggregate, it's not a Metacritic, but I mean, if only 9% of critics gave it a positive review, but we'll see. We'll give anything a chance, honestly. But
like I said, I don't, and I'm not like one of those that I think it's necessarily looked like the most amazing thing ever. It seems like a unique and interesting movie, and I'm interested to see it. But I'm not one of here being like, oh my gosh, we're ready for peak. It's going to be a masterpiece. I'm like, no, it could be really cool, and I want it to be. But I'm like, I might watch it and easily just not really care for it.
Like, could be okay.
Like Army of Dead. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, anyways, well, I think that's going to about do it for episode 3, which is part 2 of episode 2.
Yeah, episode 2, part 2, episode 3.
So we didn't realize going into this that there were so many dang good movies in the 2000s, but
yeah,
we were going to the movies more in the 2000s than we were in the 90s.
Exactly.
So technically we grew up with them as well. But yeah, man, 2000s, from 2000 to 2009 is excellent.
It's a great decade.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is, looking back at it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up.
Yeah, I don't have anything else for us.
Cool. Well, I think next episode might be a 2023 in review, and then we might do our Nolan filmography after that.
Sounds like a plan. We'll get to the 2010s eventually.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks for listening. This is the Film Jump, signing out.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
You're not in Kansas anymore. You are on Pandora.
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.